Good morning and welcome to Brandenburg News Network. I am Donna Brandenburg. It's the 17th day of April 2025, 17, my favorite number. And welcome to our show today. We're going to start out talking about the Easter week and some of the anomalies or things that maybe fit better if we look at it another way, because, quite honestly, we're always seeking the truth and we need to be able to adjust if new information comes out or if we look at things a different way and see something that we've missed. The second hour is with David Leskowski, and I think you're going to find this really interesting. David and a lot of the guys being guys and girls, we're from Michigan, everybody's a guy here. All of the people up in Alberta that are really working on relations with the United States. I've been talking to them. I've been working with them and passing information on, and it's been really a pleasure and an honor to be able to talk to these people. They've been working so hard, and they really want to be working with President Trump, which is an exciting time that we're in. We can see things changing. We can see people's hearts changing, the way they approach things. They're open to different directions, because I think all of us know that the way that it's been going on for years, kind of wrong. So anyhow, we're going to start out though this morning with talking about Easter week and some news and such with Ralph, and then we'll be going to David Leskowski at 10. So anyhow, here we go. Morning, Ralph. How you doing?
Good morning. Good. How are you?
Good. So now, just so that everybody knows, you and I are very good friends. We've known each other forever. So at any rate, I wanted to start out this morning by playing a wonderful video that President Trump did on Easter, on the resurrection. We always called it Resurrection Day. Okay. When I was growing up, it was Resurrection Day, somewhat Easter, but the focus for us was on Resurrection Day. So let me bring this in, and I'm going to play what went on and what President Trump had to say, because he had a great message.
Greg Laurie here at the White House. We just had a wonderful evening with the president. He took a lot of time with us. He shared some amazing words with us about the resurrection of Jesus Christ and the importance of his death on the cross.
And being here with you in the middle of Holy Week as we remember two of the most monumental events in all of history, the death and the resurrection of Jesus Christ. Nearly 2,000 years ago during the sacred week, the living Son of God entered Jerusalem in triumph. Soon after, the Savior of mankind, who brought truth and light into the world, was betrayed, arrested, and tried, beaten, and nailed to a cross and crucified. For our sake, he gave up his life, and as the very great Reverend Billy Graham once said, God proved his love on the cross when Christ hung and bled and died. It was God saying to the world, I love you. Those are beautiful words from a great man back in time. 3 days later, Christ's followers found the empty tomb. Jesus had defeated darkness and death and promised new life to all of humankind. And that's what we celebrate each year at Easter, as we joyfully proclaim on Sunday, he is risen. The death and resurrection of Jesus are the essence of the Christian faith. Whether rich or poor, healthy or sick, young or old, or in times of peace or war, Christians everywhere find solace and hope in the knowledge that Christ died for them and that they could be united with him in heaven. And that's what we want. That's what we all want.
Then he very graciously took us upstairs, gave us a tour of the upper area, including the Lincoln bedroom. It was just amazing, and just what a privilege it is to be here in this beautiful place on this beautiful night, celebrating Easter.
Isn't that wonderful? I think he did a really good job with the message, and he's just been so kind and gracious, and you can really see the fact that he really does care, and he very much has been an unapologetic Christian following Jesus. And people want to look at and find fault with people. That seems to be a human failing, finding fault with others. There's a time and a place for that. However, a lot of us, all of us, have fallen short of the glory of God. Every single one of us. If somebody tells me that they haven't, I'm going to say, all right, first of all, that's a lie. That is a lie, because we are fallen. There are, and when people say, "Oh, I'm not," I don't need a savior. I'm like, pretty much every single person has things that we would change about the past, that we've learned from. And God gave us the ability to make choices. He gave us free will. We don't always do the right thing, but it's a learning process. And for Christians, unfortunately, I think because so many people play the piety game, oh, I'm better than you, I'm better than you. And I've seen it. It disgusts me, totally disgusts me on behavior, honestly. But the fact is that we're forgiven, and God looks at us and says, yep, it's sort of like, I like to do an analogy of a dog, a puppy. We love our puppies, but they pee on the floor sometimes, right? They don't always get things right. And we love them anyway. We help clean up the mess, and then we love them back and say, come on, you can do it again. You can make this, you can do it. I believe in you. And I think, quite honestly, that's kind of a poor analogy, but a very simplified analogy of being forgiven when we don't do things the way that we should. But we're learning, and that's what it is to be a Christian. It's not to be perfect. It's to be forgiven. So anyhow, what I said that you have a meme. Are you there?
Yeah, I had a meme. I was going to see if I could find that was related to that, but having a hard time finding it.
Oh, that's okay. Let's just get on and talk this morning, and I think that's going to be good enough. So like as I said before, Ralph and I are good friends. Last night we got talking about the Easter week, which I think is really significant. We both used to go to a Messianic church, which is a wonderful way to study. We studied Messianic for years and years. There's a huge significance between what happened in Jesus's life. It actually follows the feast days of the Jewish religion.
I think, too, for anyone that doesn't understand what Messianic Judaism is about, it's basically that the belief that Jesus was born into, raised, grew up in, and lived in the culture of Second Temple Judaism, and that he was not here to abolish the law and the prophets, but to fulfill it, and that you can't separate the study of Jesus and his teachings from the Jewish traditions and Old Testament that he referenced in a lot of cases. And so the idea behind Messianic Judaism is basically studying Jesus's life in context.
That's a great explanation. And if we look at it, our Bibles, the Holy Bible, has both the Old Testament and the New Testament. Unfortunately, the way that the West has portrayed Jesus quite often is Gentile Jesus with a lamb sitting on his foot. This has been something I've talked about for a long time. He was not. He was not. It is not easy to get a true representation without looking at the Bible as a whole and looking at Jesus as being a Jewish man in an Eastern culture. It's significant. And so, like, when we look at things, it changes the meaning when we look at what was said in the context of the time and understanding that a little bit better. And what I find is that it brings the Old Testament and the New Testament, brings them both together. But not only does it bring it together, it kind of brings the black and white words off the page into such a full life, full color representation. It's amazing. So yesterday I have a friend who is both, who is Jewish and Catholic, was raised as a Catholic, but is Jewish by lineage. And she sent me a beautiful, this is Jeannie, she sent me a beautiful blessing yesterday. And I'm going to read this to you because I think this is really, really beautiful. According to Jewish customs, today is the day to bless the people you love. I bless you with my love, with all my admiration, with all my respect. I bless your life. I bless your health. I bless your future in his entire aspects. May your house be blessed as you enter and leave it. I bless your work. I bless your spiritual life. I bless all your plans and goals for the upcoming year. Let us pray that it will always be like this. Today is the day of blessing. And I wanted to thank her for that, but also I bless all of you out there with the same blessings that she brought forward, which I think is really beautiful. So do we want to, where do we want to go with this? Because I wrote out a timeline of this yesterday, and I think that I'm going to let you explain it because you also have a very, very freestyle way of explaining it. And I know you're going to put in all sorts of supporting information. So why don't you give a crack at this, Ralph?
Okay. Well, I thought your explanation you posted was pretty well spot on. But yeah, this has bugged me for quite a while, is that when you look at the traditional Christian tradition timeline of the crucifixion and resurrection of Jesus, it is that Jesus was crucified on Friday, right? Friday night at sundown.
That's true. That's traditional for the Christian church.
In the tomb on Saturday, and then raised on Sunday morning. Well, that kind of relies on the English translation, and in particular, certain specific English translations of Jesus being raised on the third day and inclusive counting of the days, but it ignores the numerous times where it said that he was going to be buried for 3 days and 3 nights. And when you start from Friday, you've only got 2 nights, and even with inclusive counting, you've got 3 days but only 2 nights. And it never really made sense to me until I started studying it more in a Jewish feast context, because there's a lot of events in Jesus's life that line up with the Jewish feast days. And the feasts in Judaism are incredibly significant. There are some traditions that line up perfectly with things in Jesus's life and are in a way kind of a culturally ingrained prophecy of Jesus's coming here and the events he didn't just fulfill the explicit prophecies in the Old Testament. He also fulfilled almost all of the feasts.
Only one left to go, actually, and that's the Feast of Trumpets.
Yep.
So let me throw something in here that I think is significant, and give you an example. During Passover, because we celebrated Passover for years, the matzah it's pierced, and I believe that was a prophecy of Jesus being pierced on the cross. That's the tradition. That's a messianic tradition to acknowledge that, even that.
Yeah, and there's if you ever get a chance to do a messianic Jewish Passover Seder, take the opportunity to do it. It is. They do a very good job of explaining the significance of each of those traditions and how they tie into directly pointing to Jesus.
Well, and this is significant because in today's church, a lot of what's going on is they've taken it and put it into pop psychology rather than the focus on God and not on us. It's all about doing the work instead of God doing the work. But the focus really isn't on teaching the Bible so much as it is to relate the church being a self-help group and or pop psychology.
Yep. So my belief, and this is pretty much what you wrote about, or what you posted last night, my belief lines up with that pretty well too, is that Jesus's crucifixion didn't happen on Friday, I don't think. I think it happened on Wednesday. And I've seen the arguments for Friday, I've seen arguments for Thursday. But in my opinion, I don't think they line up well not as well as the significance of everything with him being crucified on Wednesday. And I'll go into that a little bit. But the first thing you have to kind of go into this with is that at the time, they didn't have the accurate clocks like we have now. And so nowadays we reckon time from midnight to midnight, right? So like Thursday is from midnight, midnight of, there's the boundary between Wednesday and Thursday is at midnight, and the boundary between Thursday and Friday is at midnight. So we are 9 hours and 20 minutes into Thursday right now, right? Well, that is very much dependent on modern clocks, because otherwise it's absolutely useless during the day. And so historically, days would have been counted from sundown until sundown. So, for example, the Sabbath is from sundown on Friday until sundown on Saturday. And that is supposed to be the traditional end of the week day or Saturday. It ends at Saturday night, not at this point, probably about 5 hours later in the middle of the solar day. So you have to drop the concept that days go from midnight to midnight, because that just wasn't a thing back when the Bible was written. That said, now if we back up into the timeline of Jesus' crucifixion, if you place Jesus' crucifixion on Wednesday and you premise it on Jesus died at or around 3 p.m. in the afternoon on Wednesday, the reason why that's significant is because that is at the time when the Passover lamb is supposed to be slaughtered. So Jesus ends up lining up perfectly with the Passover lamb. And then they rush to get him in the tomb before the Sabbath. Well, the Sabbath doesn't just mean the weekly Sabbath. You've also got any of the high holy days that are also considered the Sabbath. And so that week, there were 2 Sabbaths because it was the week of Passover. So you have, he had to be in the tomb before sundown on Wednesday in order to not violate the Sabbath for Passover on Thursday.
Let's add one more to it on Palm Sunday. That was also Lamb Selection Day.
Yeah, there's so many things that line up with culturally. It pointed, like everything pointed to Jesus. And that's why there were so many Jewish people that followed him at the time. It made sense. So yeah, Passover lamb being slaughtered at the same time as Jesus, for him serving as the sacrifice for Passover, but also the final sacrifice, basically.
Let's go back to Thursday, the high holy day. You were talking about that. That was a high holy day also.
Yeah. So you've got Passover that day, and then Friday you've got Friday is the only day between there and the weekly Sabbath for the women to be able to go out and buy burial spices, because they had to buy burial spices. You cannot do that on the Sabbath because carrying money, and that's, violating the Sabbath at the time was a very serious offense. You look back in the Old Testament, and there was a guy that was sentenced to death for gathering firewood on the Sabbath. This was a serious thing. And so if you go back to Wednesday and say, okay, Wednesday he died, Thursday, nowadays from sundown on Wednesday until sundown on Thursday, was a high holy day because of Passover. Friday was a normal day. They could go buy spices that day. Then you've got the weekly Sabbath that starts Friday night and goes until Saturday night. now, which that would have comprised their Saturday, the Sabbath. That ends Saturday at sundown. I believe that is exactly when he was resurrected, was Saturday at sundown, and that the women then found the tomb empty when they went there at the crack of dawn on Sunday morning. But I believe he was resurrected on Saturday at sundown. That fulfills the 3 days and 3 nights that's in there, which also, lines up with the story of Jonah. That's specifically referenced as 3 days and 3 nights, right? So if you go from rushing to put him in the tomb on Wednesday until being resurrected on Saturday night at sundown, it's 3 days and 3 nights. It also means that he was resurrected at the beginning of the first day of the week. The beginning of the first day of creation, because the weeks are 7 days long to denote the process of creation, right? And the seventh day is just because that's the day God rested. And the first day, though, what happened in creation on the first day? God said, "Let there be light." And so you have Jesus resurrected at the very beginning of the first day, in the beginning of that week, in the beginning of new creation, having him resurrected then and starting a new era. There's so many things that line up correctly with the process of Passover, as you said, Lamb Selection Day, the him being literally the Passover lamb for the world at the proper time, at the call of the shofar that day, and having just everything lines up. Whereas if you go from Friday, if you go from Friday to Sunday, it's a very much Western-centric version of time reckoning that's required for that to work. You have to be tied into the midnight to midnight thing, or it just doesn't really work. Aside from that, if you go Friday to Sunday, when were the women supposed to be able to buy burial spices? They couldn't on the Sabbath, and not without violating Sabbath rules. And so there's contradictions there. It doesn't fulfill the correct amount of time, doesn't fulfill the Jewish rules, doesn't line up with Passover. But if you just adjust your thinking just a little bit and start studying it in historical context, it's like, oh man, it clicks, and there's so much significance there, and it means that the entirety of the Old Testament points to that one event, and it lines up just beautifully. And it's when I started when I got into studying it in that way and realizing how well it lined up, it was like taking all of these little puzzle pieces I had in my mind that just never quite fit together, and then realizing, aha, that's how they fit together. That makes perfect sense. It's logical. It's non-contradictory. And there's so many things that are prophetic in the Old Testament that line up. It was so weird for that one event, the most significant series of events in Christianity, really, to not line up properly. And then you shift your thinking just a little bit, and it lines up perfectly. It lines up historically. It lines up religiously. It's a beautiful thing.
I think there's been a lot of things that we've missed along the way, no matter which direction that we're looking at. So we do have to look at things a little differently and consider all things and question all things, because it's going to bring us closer to the truth.
And I can appreciate the people that still argue for Friday, but I disagree with that. But I appreciate that people are still willing to argue that and stand on it and debate that, because it means that people have to be knowledgeable about the different points of view to be able to discuss that. And that's one of the things that really bugs me about the Council of Nicaea and what happened there. I think that was one of the biggest disservices to Christianity that we've ever had, because prior to that, there was a lot of discussion and debate on a lot of the interpretation of the Bible. And the Council of Nicaea really squelched a lot of that and said, no, basically you either agree with these particular interpretations that we're going to put out, or we are not going to consider you Christian and you're going to be ostracized. And it cut out so much of that very knowledgeable discussion that if you start looking back at the things that were discussed at the time, there were some people that very passionately argued with biblical backing for different viewpoints on things, and it quelched all of the discussion on it, and meant that people no longer had to be knowledgeable on all of those subjects. They didn't study it anymore because they just accepted it. I disagree with that entirely, in that you need that discussion to find the truth.
You need that time to bounce things off of other people, because when you talk to other people, they will bring in certain things in the conversation that you didn't think about, and it will change the trajectory just a little bit so that you can see things. And quite honestly, we've been programmed not to question. Just spit the answers out. Schools have done it, and our indoctrination camps and such. But this is culturally, they really have worked hard at turning us into obedient sheeple, and that's unfortunate. So I completely agree with you on this. And then I would like to bring up another point, which was Jesus's birth, which is kind of significant in this. Traditionally, we in America grew up with Gentile Jesus with a lamb on his foot, and he was kicked out of the inn and was born into this beautiful little farmyard manger with the hay in the manger and that sort of thing. That's not accurate either. Jesus was, when they say carpenter, the term that was used there was a tecton. He was a stonemason. And according to Josephus, he was a very large man for the time that he lived. And Josephus was a Jewish historian who was alive at the time. So I think that this is fairly significant as we go through this. The inn they didn't have hotels, they didn't have inns. When they mention it that way, it was more likely a large family home, which they were going back for the census, correct? Yep. And this is a picture, honestly, of a family making judgments on him and his betrothed, who was clearly pregnant, and they would not allow them. They were rejected by their own families and thrown out into more likely a cave, born on 6 feet of manure in a cave where the shepherds spent their time, the blackened roof of the cave. And that's where Jesus was born. And I really think that's a better picture of what actually happened also, because when he is born into our hearts, when we accept Jesus as our Savior, the gift from God, that he wanted a relationship so much that he wouldn't even spare his only begotten Son, that whosoever believeth in him shall not perish but have everlasting life. When he's born into our hearts, he's not born into a clean, wonderful place. He's born into us, who has fallen with all of our craziness, trying to navigate this fallen world. And guess what? He puts the light of God in us, and it changes everything. When people accept the gift of God, and they ask that Holy Spirit to come into their lives, their heart, and we continue to walk, it's rarely an immediate process. Sometimes people are changed instantly. My dad is in that category, and he was an amazing testimony to what happens when somebody truly accepts God's gift of a Savior and says, I'm a mess. I don't have all the answers, and I'm hurt. I'm hurt. I don't like what I've seen. I'm carrying all of this, and I've even done things that I shouldn't have done. And when we accept it, God comes over and gives us the righteousness of Christ and says, That's okay. I forgive you. Let's do this together so you don't have to be alone. And when the veil was rent in two, in that, the moment he said, it is finished, that doorway to God himself, not all these other things that are distractions. So we've even been distracted. It's not just in the news. We've been distracted away from God through his Savior Christ, who made the way. We've been distracted to look at all this pop culture. Do this, you'll feel better. Do that, you'll feel better. It's not about feeling better. It's about the transformative power of Jesus Christ that God literally leads us into. God literally transforms us and makes us a new creation. And I'm going to tell you, I got to see it firsthand in a huge way with my father. And it was amazing. He wasn't even the same person. And I'm going to tell you, he was a great dad. He was a fantastic dad. Incredibly idealistic. He would never, ever do anything that was wrong because he realized and appreciated and loved God and was going to do the right thing, because not out of obligation. That's what the Christian church teaches right now, mostly. Some of them don't, but very few. It was because pure and simple, he wanted to do the right thing because he actually loved God.
Yeah, and that ties back in with the being resurrected on the first day of the week, Sunday, which started Saturday night at sundown traditionally, and forming the new creation. He came into this world and in a place akin to our terrible, messy hearts, and was resurrected in, to form the new creation. And as you said with the end too, we have to be very careful about the perversion of language, because and the cultural biases that we have toward the way things currently are portrayed, because like you said, the inn a lot of times was just the family basically having a spare room, and
they kicked him out. They no, we don't have any room for you because you're not married yet and you're pregnant.
Yep.
Oh no. How many times does that happen around us? And people are ostracized because it doesn't match up with other people's little piety contests they have going on. You know what? I have a huge problem with that. Jesus sat with prostitutes. He sat with tax collectors. He said the truth, but he loved them and he accepted them and they were his friends. So, it's just I have a real problem seeing that happen. I think God opened his arms and said, everyone is welcome. Come in and we'll do this together.
Yeah.
Anything else on your mind about it? We can go through some of the key assumptions when we're going through this timeline. Number one, the day of reckoning. Days run from sundown to sundown, Jewish tradition. And I can give you the verses, Genesis 1:5 and Leviticus 23:32. Crucifixion day, Wednesday, with death at 3 p.m. on Nisan 14, the time of Passover lamb slaughter. Resurrection, Saturday, at or after sundown, marking the start of the first day of the week, Sunday being the sundown Saturday. New life, new creation. 3 days and 3 nights, literal interpretation of Matthew 12:40, 3 days and 3 nights. 5, the Passover timing. Passover lambs were slaughtered on Nisan 14 in the afternoon, Exodus 12:6, between the evenings, often interpreted as twilight or afternoon, with a Passover meal being eaten after sundown, Nisan 15. Symbolic connection, resurrection at the start of the first day ties to creation's first day, Genesis 1:1-5. Isn't that cool? I just think this is so cool. And the feast days, to go through the feast days and see how they absolutely, and all the symbolism, we've been freaking out for the past, I don't know how many years, on the symbolism that really tells us what the bad guys are doing. They kind of put it right out there because they're going to tell us what they're doing, because they think that in Satanism, they think if they tell you, whether you know it or not, that they're telling you, and whether you acknowledge it or not, they say that you just gave them permission to do whatever it is that they've done in their rituals, their sacrifices, and all this sort of thing that Satanists do. Well, the Bible tells us, because Satan is a liar, he's a complete liar, his native tongue is lies, and he can't figure anything out for himself, so he's got a copy, and then he inverts it. So the Bible told us exactly what was going to happen and how it was going to happen. And the symbolism was there, and it was there from the beginning. So which symbolism are we studying? Right now, everybody's looking at this. A lot of people are looking at the satanic symbolism, which I agree with. I think it's important to see that, because then you get a true picture of what's happening. They're right out there with it, but
it's important. It's important to see it. It's also important to not be scared of it.
Oh yeah, you can walk without any fear. Just walk right in there. And when Jesus was talking to the disciples at Caesarea Philippi, what did he say? He said, the gates of hell shall not prevail against you. That doesn't mean stay out. That means you walk in there,
rush right in there and save people,
and take back, conquer it. Take back what Satan has stolen.
Yep. And you've also got Jesus walking on water, which in ancient Jewish tradition, the sea was seen as a very, very strong allegory for hell. And so Jesus comes right out walking on hell,
you walking right past them.
Yeah, walking right, and was about to walk right past them on their boat in their panic and turmoil, and here Jesus is just casually walking past them on top of hell.
Yeah, kind of looking at them. Oh, are you guys having problems? Isn't that like a dad? A dad would do that. How's that working for you? I told you to have faith.
Yeah.
And you're sitting there doing a complete freak out in the middle of the sea, and he just walks right past him. No problem. Oh, problems? Huh.
God's hilarious. I think one of my favorite jokes, or I wouldn't say, I guess, joke, but humor things, was in the Old Testament there, and I can't remember off the top of my head where it is in the Old Testament, but there's a point where God says, basically, I swear by myself that what I'm telling you is true. It's like, it's funny because it's like, I don't know. There's a lot of places in there that are just very funny, and that's one of them. Just Jesus just about walking past the boat on hell.
No problem. I got this. What's your problem? You can do greater things than these.
Yeah.
The thing here's another thing that I think we're going to see a huge push, this whole UFO thing coming out. Now, I have probably lots of opinions on this, but I haven't really spoken much on this. However, when you look at the possibilities and or a biblical perspective on this, I think a lot of things that we're seeing is a multidimensional crack in what we're used to seeing in the material world. That's what I really believe that we're seeing. Jesus walked through walls. People, this sort of thing happens, and I think that we're literally seeing a breach in reality. And I don't think all of it is. I think some of it's just technology that our government has had for many, many years. They've had it for many years. And that has been proven over and over again. But I also think that we have a high probability of seeing multidimensional activity happen at the same time.
Yep. And one way or another, it's still God's creation.
Yeah. So the question that I get asked a lot is, what happens if, one of the funniest stories I think that I have to tell on this, because I think we learn things by stories, right? So I was in a class with my kids, and I homeschooled my kids. So I took the kids to this class where they were doing artisan broom making. So we did every pioneer thing on the planet. So this guy is up in front of the group, and I'm going to say there were probably maybe 30, 40 kids in there, and maybe 10 moms. Typically, homeschool families are very large. You don't already know that. So this guy that was given the class, and I'm not kidding you, gave the class looking straight at me for probably 85% of the class. A normal person would have probably been freaked out, but I'm like, well, this is going to be a fun little day. Let's see what kind of crazy this goes into. So I went up and I talked to him after the class because I wanted to figure out what was going on here. And in the spiritual realm, a lot of people have gifts and they see things that you don't necessarily see unless you've got a gift from God. Well, the guy looks at me and I said, so you've got my curiosity. What's going on here? He looks at me and he goes, I know you know. And I'm like, really? So what does that mean? And I already knew where this was going. I could have told you before he said one word at exactly where this conversation was going. So I was having fun with this. This was a riot. He says, you know that they exist. And I said, oh, you talking UFOs? He goes, yeah. And I know you know. And I'm like, really? So I said, okay. Well, and then he launches into a story. He said, I used to work for NASA. And he said, when I think it was Apollo 11 went up, he said, I was working in telemetry. And he said, we saw this blip that went around the rocket when it went up. So the spacecraft. And I said, really? He said, yeah. He said, we saw it. He said, we've seen it a lot. There's all sorts of things that we've seen. And I said, okay. And he said, do you know what would happen to all the Christians if they knew that UFOs were out there or that there was an alternative thing going on? I'm like, no, try me. What do you think would happen? And you could see the demonic coming out on him. He said their faith would be dashed to the shores. They would have nothing to have faith in anymore. It would destroy everything. And I'm like, really? And he goes, what do you think? And I'm like, well, honestly, what I think is it wouldn't change anything for me because my God is bigger than anything we can see. And he can create 1 million universes in one time that we don't know, we don't need to know, but it wouldn't change anything for me. I trust God no matter what I see on the outside. And he had no idea what to say. And all of a sudden, I was able to flip scripture out of there like I can't do on a normal day, man. It was coming out of me like a volcano blowing the top off the mountain, right? So, and I looked at him and I said, you, sir, are lost. And instead of reading everything outside of the Bible, you need to get in the Bible and read scripture for yourself. Find out what's real and ask God to help you understand what's going on, because you are completely lost and will continue to be lost without the guidance of God. You're like a ship. You're like a ship on the ocean that's adrift. If you don't have the compass pointing you true north, you're going to take anything that comes your way and think that it's truth just because you learned something new, instead of grounding it on fact, on the basis of faith, and on the basis of asking God, what are you supposed to learn from this? And he will show you the truth every single time. Your faith grows, your ability to reason things out, discernment grows, and even sometimes wisdom grows. But I'm going to tell you, we're going to see things that are demonic, and they're going to try to explain it away in many, many different ways. So just hold on. It's going to be amazing.
Yeah. I've heard that argument from somebody before that I was having a discussion with about how, oh man, if we, when they tell us all about the aliens, that it's gonna shake Christians to their core. It's like, yeah, you think that you think that we believe in a God that is only capable of creating us and the world that we see, and you're saying that Christians don't believe in angels, demons, heaven, hell, the spiritual realm, and everything else outside of this that we can't see or perceive. You're saying that Christians are the ones that would have a hard time believing all of this stuff exists and that God could create it and God is bigger than that. You know?
Yes, it's an amazing thing. I'm going to read a couple comments. Denise says, I love the phrase, what would Jesus do? We should be aware of our actions. Absolutely. My father taught me a good phrase. If you speak, think first. Is it true? Is it kind? If not, never mind. I'm always aware that I'm a role model for God. If I treat people with kindness, but truth, confidence, etc., it may just rub off. That's right. We are the body of Christ. I enjoyed the movie The Shack, where the father, whose daughter was kidnapped on a camping trip, must face his fears and seek repentance with God. That there's a lot to be said about that, faith over fear. The fact that we don't have to understand everything around us is I'm the one that charges right into the fire. If there's a problem, I'm like, I want to get in there and figure it out. So that's probably why I do so much analysis. And I know a lot of people are not always encouraged by that. That's okay. We need to go through that process. And it's a process which I am probably going to be on for life just because I like to solve problems, no matter what it is. That's my favorite thing. One of my favorite things to do is I just like to solve problems. You're never going to see me going and retiring on a golf course or sitting on the beach full time. I like to build and I like to solve problems. So that's why we go into analysis here. And without fear, you look at the problems and go, well, that's a problem. Is it good? No, it's good. Am I a little annoyed with it? Yeah, I'm a little annoyed with this stuff and it needs to get fixed. It's like a burr under your saddle. So then you jump in and you figure out better ways of doing it and ways to fix it. So, and that's on an individual basis, which I think is significant. The timeline of the resurrection is so, it's really so amazing. I have the entire outline on my Telegram channel at Brandenburg, the number 4 MI, if you want to reference it. There's more to it than that. It was a very long post. In fact, Telegram wouldn't even let me put the whole thing on one post. So it's on 2 posts. It was right before the link to today's show that was on. And I find it to be very, very interesting. We should go through the feast days, Ralph. That would be really fun. I believe the only one left to go is the Feast of Trumpets, which is historically it's in the fall. So.
Yep. And referenced in Revelation.
Yeah, Revelations is a very interesting book to me. I absolutely believe every single word that it's our understanding that can't reconcile it. People say, oh, there's all these contradictions in the Bible. Well, there are some in the Bible, but it's because of what men put in the Bible. Like God gave us 10 commandments. That wasn't good enough. The Jews had to put in another 648 more. So it's kind of like our system that we have in governance now. We started out with a great Constitution, the Bill of Rights. Fantastic, right? And now how many new laws and rules and regulations and such that shows an impure heart when you take those rights given by God away and try to legislate it. It goes right back to self-interest, self-enrichment, building the golden calf again and worshiping it. Our system is entirely built on worshiping the money system, the golden calf. Yep. We went right back to doing what God told us not to do. Not worshiping money, worshiping him and letting him figure out the rest of it.
Hey, I finally found that meme.
Okay.
And yeah, like you said, one of the main things about Christianity is that we all know we're screwing up. You know, we are all screw ups. We have all sinned and fallen short of the glory of God. You know, that you have to accept that as you are, you know, everyone alive today is imperfect. And what we're supposed to be doing, though, is it's a spiritual version of continuous process improvement. You're supposed to be going through your life, finding the thing that you're screwing up on, fixing it, and moving on to the next problem, to always try to be more and more Christ-like, be more and more perfect. You are never going to achieve it, but not without the grace of God. You will never achieve it without the grace of God. However, you should always try to continue to get closer to that ideal.
The Bible says that he's the author and finisher of our faith.
Yeah.
Which I find to be significant.
And that's where I get a lot of times very upset at the movements and or lifestyle choices that end up getting promoted, which are all about trying to lock people into a lifestyle or personality trait that revolves around something that the Bible calls out as sinful, because it raises that barrier of exit for people to leave that behavior that they've adopted, because they adopt it as part of their personality. And there are many, many ways in which our culture promotes basically trying to get people to adopt some aspect of a sinful nature as part of their core personality or as part of their cultural identity.
And when you leave, you're ostracized.
Right. And you want to stop doing that. Okay, you're going to have to leave this community, which you see, because you've adopted as your identity. You see this community as being your only place that you fit in. And there are, you can think what you want about which community I'm talking about, but it's not one, it's a lot of them.
Political parties are even part of it.
Yeah.
If you disagree, it's a Masonic system. You are being vetted from the time you show up there. And if you don't fall in line with what the agenda is, and it's passed down to them through the money lords that are out there who are buying it off. And I said it before, and I'm going to say it again. The Republican and Democrat parties, because they have taken dark money and PAC money, foreign money, are a threat to the United States of America. That's both domestic and foreign. Not only have they bought off our land, they're buying off our politics. And anyone who chooses to stand with them is guilty by association. It's like it's like being there to murder, and not stopping it.
Yeah, and
they're all into it, and they've all bowed to that golden calf to go and do what it takes to keep the money flowing. The money has to stop.
Yep. And our culture promotes a lot of that stuff. Our media promotes a lot of that stuff. There are so many things in modern life that are being promoted as normal or as wholesome things, which if you were to take a step back and say, is this actually normal? Is this actually wholesome? And read through the Bible, is this what I'm supposed to be doing? And culturally, looking back at other cultures that have done the same things and said, what happened to them? Is this actually a good idea? There are so many things that are being promoted that are really kind of horrific, and it takes a strong will to look at that and say, no, our culture is wrong. We have slid downhill, and we need to fix that. And it's not to condemn the people that have gotten into that sort of thing so much as we need to help them. They need a place to go after this. They need forgiveness. They need to be pulled out of this beast system that is trying to eat them, and I mean,
destroy them. It's about destroying. It's just like the vax and everything else that's there. It has been proven over and over again that this is like a death murder cult that's going on, the people that are in charge. So what are they going to do? Of course they're going to do crazy things in order to destroy human beings. And I think the basis of that is because we're God's children, and Satan's going to work right through them. Evil is going to work through them to erase the presence of God here. And it's absurd when you think about how stupid it is. It is absurd. You're not going to erase God. It's not going to happen. You erase God, you erase yourself. He is the one that's sustaining all of this. And you've got created beings, including the angels, the fallen angels. They're created beings. The fallen angels think that they're in their arrogance, that they don't need God, and that they're going to erase God by getting rid of all of his children. Not going to happen. They're on the losing side of any type of intelligence that could possibly be out there. It's absurd.
Yep. And it's all still God's creation.
And when we walk with God, and I'm not just saying Christian is a label, I'm talking about people who actually believe in God and walk with God. He never leaves nor forsakes us. So you've got protection. You've got some protection from God. That is significant to talk about. And you can just walk right up through the middle of evil and just knock it right off your shoulder. Don't worry about it.
Yep.
So, well, this was a great discussion. A lot of people on the chats are saying things. Our God is a great big God. That's right, Denise. That's absolutely right. And well, I appreciate the conversation here. I can see David backstage here, so we can probably I'm going to see if he's ready. His camera's off. David, are you there? Oh, yep, there's David. So I'm going to go into the break here, and we're going to be talking about Alberta, Canada, and U.S. relations. And I've kind of been having a good time, kind of like being a go-between between several groups of people here, trying to make sure that we can get this to work. Because I'm going to tell you what, I think that we love Canada. I mean, who doesn't love Canada? Canadians are some of the most polite people I've ever met in my life. That's the truth. I actually was in a meeting one time with somebody who was clearly Canadian or part of that culture, walked me down 3 flights of stairs in this office building, opened the door and said, "You just have such a nice day today." And who walks you down through an office building to make sure you get out and you feel welcome to come back again? I was like, I love Canadians. We can learn a lot from them. So certainly hospitality and such. So we're going to go to that right now. And thank you for being on today, Ralph. It was a great conversation. I'm sure we're going to have more probably later in the day. So anyhow, and we'll be back tomorrow. Ralph will be back on tomorrow. I just voluntold you tomorrow with Off the Grid. So I'm going to take a quick 1-minute break, and I will be right back with David Leskowski. Good morning and welcome to the second hour of Brandenburg News Network. I am Donna Brandenburg, and it's the 17th day of April 2025. Welcome to our show. I'm going to go right to welcoming David on right now. Let me give you a little bit of background on him, because you all know that we had Doug Force on here with the Mythos Canada, and that kind of started a nice roll into relations between Canada and the United States, seeing what the people want, not the politicians, and how not only has Canada have an interesting background that may not exactly be what they've been teaching us in the history books. The United States has been the same way. David Leskowski has worked for provincial and federal services in Alberta, Saskatchewan, British Columbia, and the Yukon Territories under conservative, liberal, and NDP governments. He has been a conservation officer and federal fisheries officer, a chartered insurance professional, and a risk management consultant. David has been active in political campaigns since 1982. He was an area coordinator with the Reform Party and was the national vice president of the Canadian Alliance Party. He was on the Interim Joint Council of the Conservative Party and as co-chair of the Constitution Committee. I like that word. David authored the first constitution of the new party. He is active in Alberta provincial politics, seeking to bring unity of purpose among like-minded, freedom-loving Albertans. Welcome to our show today, David. It's so nice to have you on.
Yeah, nice to see you face to face, and yeah, nice to talk to you. How's your weather there today?
I haven't even been outside, so I don't know. I'm hoping it's good because I really want to ride a horse today.
Okay.
That's on my to-do list. So, like, you know, we all have regular lives. So part of my regular life is that I have bees. And so today I'm planning on starting, I got to get my new beehives painted. So I'm adding 6 new hives this year. So I need to go get the outsides painted, and that's always a process. And then within less than a month, I'll have my new bees here, which I'm very excited about. I love bees.
Awesome.
Awesome. Yeah, well,
Awesome.
I really appreciate you coming on the show. And I want to say I'm just so honored to know you, and my condolences on the death of Doug Force. It was so shocking. What an amazing man, and the work that he did was so amazing. The fact that he was basically asked to leave the United States for the work that he was doing to show what was the truth behind the formation of not only Canada, but the United States. And he told me he had all the evidence on what happened for real in the United States. And unfortunately, he never had the opportunity to bring that forward and do a documentary on the United States. I'm very sad about that, but we're going to carry on his work and continue to bring truth forward. So what would you like to talk about today?
Well, I mean, I guess the elephant in the room is Canadian election is going on, and your president has talked about our relations being closer.
For some reason, your sound is getting, it must be hitting something, so it's breaking up.
Okay. Is that any better?
No, it's still kind of crackly, but let's try it again. We can try it there, okay?
Okay, I'm on a wireless, where I am in Canada by a lake here, I'm on a wireless internet connection. So sometimes sometimes it's just so terrible, I have to end the call and then start again, and then the cell tower picks me up in a different band. So if it's really bad, I'll exit and come back in, it'll probably be better.
Why don't we try that, because it's a little rough right now, and I'm afraid that it would be hard for people to listen to. All
right, I'll just leave and I'll come back in.
Perfect.
Okay.
We'll play the elevator music. Dun, dun, dun. which is kind of fun. You know, I think that this is a really big part of what we're doing here with BNN is being authentic, not necessarily being canned or what people expect, but we're more interested in getting to the truth, bringing people's voices out who have been censored, giving them a platform or a place to speak so that we defend their rights, and we just keep going. All right.
Is that better?
It's a little better.
Okay. Well, hopefully.
It's a little cracky.
Okay.
Yeah, that's okay. We'll endeavor to persevere. Let's just keep going.
See what happens. Yeah, I wish I knew what was happening. Our CBC here actually set up, I think her name is Caroline, who does the press briefings for President Trump. CBC actually went to the United States and interfered in our election by forcing the question of the 51st state back onto the agenda. And as you know, for some reason, Canadians and I shouldn't say all, but Ontario Canadians somehow think they're fighting an election against Donald Trump. And so they put that back on the agenda, which kind of skyrocketed our Liberal Party back up in the polls again.
My tech guy just said, if you can turn your microphone down just a little bit, that may take the crackling out. Let's try that.
Okay. I can't turn my mic down. I can put it away a little bit.
Oh, let's try that.
A little bit better? Okay. Yeah, so anyway, I was just wondering if you were talking about the book of Revelation today, if anybody out there actually believes that we are already together as a kingdom. Like the book of Revelation talks about at the end times, 10 kingdoms rising out of the oceans. And it's weird in a way that President Donald Trump is pretty much running Canada right now. He sets the agenda. He's forced us to examine our fentanyl business, our border crossing, our securities, shaming us correctly for not putting our percentage into NATO. In some ways, we already are one kingdom under Donald Trump. I was just looking at my old research here. You're probably aware of the Club of Rome. In 1976, they had decided that the world was going to be 10 kingdoms, and they were going to slowly destroy the economy of the United States, starting in 1976 to get the New World Order in place by the year 2000. And, if it's a 10 kingdom scenario, well, we may already be there, which is not a bad thing. I mean, most of us in Alberta would probably prefer the Constitution of the United States and a Republican form of government. So that's good. But unfortunately, the way Canada is set up, we have 343 seats, and about a third of them are Ontario. And then if you take Quebec in there, Western Canada, like in Alberta where we have almost no effect on the federal election at all. So,
I think that the same thing has happened in the United States to a great degree too, is that there's so much power in the heavy population concentrations that it is that it's when you get in the rural areas, it's hard to have actual fair representation. So the big cities, in my opinion, the big cities have actually enslaved the farming populations or the rural populations who don't have much of a voice. You can still overcome it. I get that. But that's why all the money is going into these big cities. They can launder into these big cities and such. And honestly, I don't even believe the population counts are accurate in the big cities at all. The stuff that's coming out on China, people are assuming that there is less than 800,000 people in China.
Wow.
With all the villages that are coming out that are empty. It's not just the big cities that they've built in order to park their broken financial system. Having something tangible is why they did it. But I don't think that the population is accurate. I know it isn't for Detroit. Detroit is much smaller than what everyone thinks it is.
Yeah. Do you want me to go back and do a little bit of a summary to explain how Alberta and the West ended up in the position we're in now?
I would love that. And so, this is your time. We're just talking. This is the first time we've talked face to face. So
yeah,
it's fun to get to know you a little bit. And yeah, you just, whichever way you want to go with it, that's the way we're going to.
Yeah, I met Doug Force a while ago, and it was interesting that, I've had these experiences where, I've lived the reality. In the 70s, I was a fisheries officer, and I was in management on the Pacific Coast. And Canada had just done the extension of our economic zone for fisheries from 12 miles to 200. And I think it was ratified in 82, but I was there during the hot years when various governments were sending ships to Canada. So there would be a record of them fishing between the 12-mile and the 200-mile zone. So then we couldn't dispute the fact they had historical fishing rights on our continental shelf. So we had a lot of criminals coming across here, and that was, I've often been tempted, during the time of the Biden administration, to call somebody and say, we experienced the same thing when the foreign vessels would come to Canada, they would empty the jails. So all the armed robbers, the rapists, the murderers, they'd empty their jails of the worst people, put them on a ship, and give it enough fuel to make it to Canada. Hopefully they'd come right in, ram one of, and they did actually in Victoria, they rammed one of our mooring docks. And then we'd catch them. And then later on, when they said, look, we can fish 13 miles offshore because you have it on your books here that we were here, you caught us doing this. But, you know, we never got rid of the criminals, like the criminals on the boats. They stayed in Canada. You know, we put them in our jails, which were much nicer than the jails they were in. And so as fisheries officers, we had our own little devious plan. You know, and I just say, I was going to give, you know, the United States a heads up saying these criminals that are loading into the United States, that's done on purpose. And it, you know, it happened to us back in the 70s. This is a long-term plan to put the worst of the worst in our country. And so what we did as fisheries officers, maybe I shouldn't say it, maybe I'll get in trouble, you know, I've kept my mouth shut about this for a long time, but we just decided, well, when we encounter one of these boats, we'll just turn it around. We'll give it just enough fuel to make it halfway to Japan, and then we'll just escort them out and make no reference in our law books at all. So that's what we did. As many of them as we could. We just caught them, turned their boats around, threatened them, if you come back, you know, you'll be blown out of the water, and then send them back into the ocean. And I guess maybe it's a heartless way to deal with it, but we just got tired of it. I mean, they were ramming our patrol boats. They were ramming our fishing vessels. They were trying to do destruction. And people could have died because of the collisions and things they were doing. And we probably kept, you know, a few criminals out of our country. But, you know, during that time, I was very strongly advised, in line with Doug Force's research, about what is Canada? What are the provinces? What is the country? And, you know, back in the 70s, that was before our phony 1982 Constitution was so-called adopted or patriated, which is a word I think they might have made up. But at the time, I was told very clearly, the Statute of Westminster in 1931 transferred actual land title to the provinces of British North America. And I was under the assumption a long time that if I researched and I studied and I read and I you know, did research in England and in Canada, somewhere I would find an act of the British North America Act 1867 that would actually describe a transfer of power from England to our federal government, because we were calling ourselves a country. And I just assumed it was there. But when I was working for the federal government, they told me, like, you can only have a force as a federal enforcement officer internationally on the inland seas and the inland waters, and that's Canada. And many times I was called in as a federal enforcement officer when a criminal was jumping the border between Alaska, Yukon Territory, and BC, because the territorial conservation officers and the British Columbia conservation officers would chase them till they hit the border. As soon as you hit the border in BC, chasing somebody who did something wrong in BC, he just hopped into the Yukon. Well, then he was free. And there was lakes that, you know, the border went right between, you know, in the water of the lake, and he would just take his boat, go over the line, and you couldn't touch him. So then when he's on the water doing this, I would get called in. So I get to catch all the international criminals and the, you know, interprovincial criminals. But I was told, as soon as that guy hits land, or as soon as he does something involving a province, we have no jurisdiction. And I was really confused about that. Like, if I'm a federal enforcement officer, why can't I go in a province and charge somebody like I used to? Before that, I was a conservation officer in Saskatchewan. I could charge somebody when they're on the lake, when they're on the land, when in their car, when they're on their highway, when they're in the park. I could do that. And they said, well, that's because provinces are sovereign. Well, really? So actually, it's a down step when you're a federal officer, because you only have authority when you're in the water. And, you know, after I met Doug, I said, you know, I've been looking and looking and looking, and you've spent 15 years. And he said, I can't find that either. So I sort of, when I met Doug, it was great to revisit all those documents again. And again, it's really hard to find something that doesn't exist. I've never found a document that actually describes Canada geographically by a territory, or a transfer from the king and the crown to a federal government. So we're kind of in an odd position. So I'll give you a step back before that. We, as you know, Canada was one of the British colonies. We had the Union of South Africa, we had the Irish Free State, Australia, and New Zealand, and Canada. We were all like children being kicked out of mom and dad's house. They said, "Get out of here! You're too expensive. You're not making us the money that we need." And so, I give England credit. They decided that we should all be totally independent. So every other colony except Canada took the route of having constituent assemblies. And like Australia, for example, they had 6 areas, 6 provinces or states, whatever you want to call them. And they were recognized as being sovereign. And then those states developed a constitution. And then over a period of time, the people who lived in those 6 autonomous sovereign states agreed on a constitution for the country, and then they became a country. They never picked up on the British system at all. And Australia was done in 1901. I think around that time, the Union of South Africa did a similar thing. The British government proclaimed them to be independent, but then they quickly developed their own constitution, and then like 86, they developed another constitution, and then at the time of Nelson Mandela, they developed another constitution on top of that, but it was all within their own country. All England did is give them their authority, and off they went. And so all the colonies except Canada had recognition of their sovereign areas. And as I alluded to, the 1931 Statute of Westminster gave title to the land and sovereignty to either the territories or the countries or the provinces. And that's what happened in Canada, is England said, we had a system where the Queen governed through a Governor General, the 1867 British North America Act. But then even in 1867, Queen Victoria didn't want one of her sons to inherit all of this. So they revoked a section of the 1867 Act saying, this is only for Queen Victoria. Until you become independent, we're going to give a governance system where you guys have a Westminster-style parliament, but we'll still be owners of the land, and we'll still give a governor general, and they will actually rule your country. And you can use this system. And I guess the magic of the whole thing, and sometimes you get all caught up in the complexity, is you have to ask, well, what was Canada like in 1867 when that happened? Well, Canada was actually not the name of a country. Canada was the name of a province. So the province of Canada then divided up into Upper and Lower Canada, which is now called Quebec and Ontario. And there were only 2 maritime provinces. So when the whole system that we live under now was designed, there only were 4 provinces. And actually it worked pretty well. Like, they gave an inordinate amount of members of parliament and Supreme Court positions to the tiny maritime provinces because they wanted them to join. They were overly fair to the maritime provinces. And so, they had a good, fair system to start with. And they never could have anticipated that the western part of the country would become so wealthy and contribute so much. But they just added. So they added British Columbia, they added the Yukon Territory, they added Newfoundland as a separate country joined. And then in 1905, there was the Saskatchewan Act and the Alberta Act, and we became provinces. Well, at that point, we should have done what all the other colonies did and say, now, England, by actual description, like lines of latitude, lines of longitude, all the provinces are described in the Act, and said, we're transferring to you. And they even went over and above and say, now all the natural resources through a Natural Resource Transfer Act, we give to you provinces. So you are sovereign. But they didn't describe a government because we were supposed to do it ourselves. All the other colonies did it themselves. They met the constituents. They formed a constitution that they liked. If they didn't like it, they had a referendum to change it. By the way, Australia's had 45 of those. Only 8 of them were passed, but I mean, they developed their own system. But in Canada, for some reason, they got away with it. The people that lived in the East said, hey, wait a minute, hold on. We have all the members of Parliament. We have all the members of the Senate. We have all the appointments of the Supreme Court. We can enrich ourselves by treating the West as if they're one of our colonies. So they usurped. They just said, well, we'll just become the king. And they told England, well, we'll just stick with it. So believe it or not, since 1867, Canada is still governed under the same system. And it's very unfair. Like, if you relate how many members of Parliament we have compared to other parts of Canada, like of the 340 members of Parliament, if we had the same ratio of members of Parliament to population that Prince Edward Island had, we would have 130 MPs out of 340. But as it is, we don't even have enough to sway an election. So, you know, it's just a simple.
We have no voice.
No. And then, you know, we had some tough times, and I don't blame, like, it's easy to blame a politician and say, well, you know, we elected premiers and we elected representative. Why didn't you fix this? Well, you know, think about it. 1931 is when we were all the colonies were given total independence. So the Statute of Westminster, Section 11, basically says there's no more reference to colonies or dominions. And for people that don't know it, in the Interpretations Act, the word colony and dominion is the same word. So all of the colonies were said, no more reference to colonies. We're done. The section in the old British North America Act that said this act will apply to the heirs and successors of Queen Victoria, they revoked the section and never put it back. So they said, no more kings, no more queens. When Queen Victoria is dead, you can't have a king or a queen from England. You can't. There's no mechanism to do that. And then they completely shut the door in 1931 when they gave the title to the land to the provinces. So that's where it's at. Now the Depression came, and I think that was the boogeyman. I think that's why people in the West, like, we had a terrible time in the West. We had economic problems. You know, we had the Dust Bowl. We had a drought, and justifiably, Eastern Canada for quite a few years helped out the West in big ways. You know, the welfare system and various economic advantages, and the railway came, and which supplied us, and you know, we had markets for goods to the east. So I mean, we really did have a good time for a few years. But then as we started populating and developing, the people in the East really wanted to keep it exactly going because they are kings in our country. The Eastern Canada has actually taken over the role of the king. You know, they now, instead of the Queen appointing a Governor General, who is actually the head of state for us, the Prime Minister gets to appoint his own boss. Like, what a ridiculous thing, eh? So the Governor General theoretically is in charge of the government, but he exists only at the whim of whoever is the Prime Minister, who can appoint that person who does what they're supposed to do for him. It's just it's ridiculous, you know. And they like the system. So you know, 1980s came around. I think a lot of people are starting to catch on that we really need to do something. So at the time, Justin Trudeau, our last loser prime minister's father, was the prime minister at the time, and he decided, well, like, before I get out of politics, I'm going to create a constitution, which basically, you know how they created our constitution. They just took the 1867 British North America Act and just changed its name to the 1867 Constitution Act.
You can't even.
I saw you shaking your.
This is amazing.
You can't make this up. No. Yeah. So anyway, they did that. So that's our Constitution. You know, it's not that complicated. They just changed the name.
So it was never really ratified properly, was it?
Well,
as a constitution, they just changed it and claimed
exactly.
it.
And even worse, the act, you know, used to say, Section 2, this act exists for Queen Victoria. And when they revoked the act, as soon as Queen Victoria died, the act actually was 1901 when she died. The act actually had no more ability to empower a king or a queen. It was over in 1901 when she died. So it's even worse. So they changed the name of a dead act, and by changing it to the Constitution, told Canadians, hey, congratulations, we now have a Constitution. like, it wasn't bad in 1867 when there was only 4 provinces in the east, but now it's totally unapplicable. Like it just didn't govern properly at all. So in the 1980s, they decided to try another scam, and they said, "Look, we're gonna write up our own constitution, Charter of Rights and Freedoms. So that will add it to the BNA Act." Okay, so well, how do we get Canadians to believe that it's okay? Because we're not going to allow the citizens to participate in this. They didn't allow any discussion.
Of course they wouldn't.
So keeping in mind, we have no country. We have no country. Like the legislature of the government of Canada pays rent to the sovereign province of Ontario. Canada doesn't even own its own buildings. So anyway, they said, how can we get people to believe that we're going to do this? Well, I know what we'll do. In England, they used to pass what they call a Styles and Titles Act, because the Queen actually owned land, right? Like she owned property. Kings and queens own the property, and that's what you need to, in order to be sovereign. You need have at least have to own the property your house is sitting on. You can't be sovereign somewhere you don't own the property. So they used to do that in England, and then in Canada they said, well, I know, we like this Elizabeth, so why don't we'll pass an act in Canada, and we'll call it the Royal Styles and Titles Act, and we'll just call her Queen of Canada. People say, well, how can you do that? She doesn't own anything. And you appoint the Governor General, like they started appointing Governor Generals in the 1950s. Very coincidentally, the same year they tried to foist this new document on us was the last time England says, we don't want anything more to do with the Governor General. You just decide what you're doing. So there was no connection. And they said, well, I know, we'll just make Queen Elizabeth the Queen of Canada. And people said, well, she has no authority from the court in England or ownership of land. So, well, it'll just be symbolic. So Canadians went along with it because we kind of like the Commonwealth in some ways. A lot of British people lived in Canada, and they said, yeah, it's like the old days, like we're living in the old time. We kind of like having a king or a queen. And, you know, we like Australia, New Zealand. We have some benefits from being in the Commonwealth. So, yeah, sure. Give her the symbolic title. So we did. So we gave Queen Elizabeth the sort of a symbolic title as a monarch, which means she doesn't own anything and is totally symbolic. So then a bunch of premiers of the sovereign provinces, which, you know, maybe you could say starting to become legitimate, you know, they recognize that, okay, the premiers in the provinces actually are governing a sovereign area. So they came together and they sort of hammered out an agreement. And you know that Canada has still a lot of stress between English and French. We've had, you know, fights on our land between the French and the English, and, you know, that carries on. So they want to be sensitive about that. So for Quebec, it's very dicey. So it's Section 23 of that proposed document. They said, okay, we're not going to tell you about your language, but if there's English people living in Quebec and they were born English, they still speak English, and they want to be educated in English, you have to guarantee that they can be educated in the English language. That's all. You can put up signs, you can do it. We just want to have the rights for English people. And Quebec said, no. With an N at the end. No. That day, stop. Not going to happen. We're going to be French. We're going to educate in French. That's it. We're not going to sign it. Well, Section 59 said, okay, 59 said that this whole document is dependent on Quebec agreeing to Section 23. Until Quebec agrees to Section 23, there is no agreement for this document. It's not rocket science. 23 says educate people in English in Quebec if they want it. 59 says, okay, on that day, when you agree to this, well, you proclaim in your sovereign territory that you've agreed to it. After the proclamation, then the section before it, Section 58, says, conditional to Section 59, this Charter of Rights and Freedoms will be proclaimed as an act in Canada. So again, it's not rocket science. Number one, educate people in English in Quebec. Number two, when you do that, you have to proclaim it because you're sovereign. Number three, after you do this, Quebec, now we have agreement and we'll proclaim it, and now we'll have it. So what do you think happened?
Nothing got done.
Well, number one, the Premier of Quebec said no. He never did sign it to this day. He still has not signed it. If you go on to ChatGPT or some of the other AIs and you put in 1982 Constitution Act Canada, it actually lies to you. Somebody has programmed it to say it's enforced because all the premiers agreed to it. The Premier did not agree to it. He never even signed it. So they took this, what they call a resolution in Parliament, and said, well, it's all here waiting for Quebec to sign it, waiting for Quebec to start the English language education, waiting for Quebec to proclaim it. And then another section says when it's proclaimed, we'll remove Section 59 and we'll renumber all the sections of the Act. So that hasn't happened. Well, what do? You're in Ottawa, and our law is whenever you proclaim something or have an action in Parliament or a vote, it has to go into what they call the Gazette. So in our Gazette, Section 2 is resolutions, propositions, whatever. So Section 3 is all the acts that have actually passed. So he said, well, we don't know what to do with this. Quebec didn't agree to it. They haven't proclaimed it. They're not teaching English language in Quebec. So they just stuck it into Section 2 for a future action to be happening as a proposition. So it still sits as a proposition. But what they did, even after that, on TV, I remember the day, they got Queen Elizabeth and Pierre Trudeau sitting at a table with Jean Chrétien, who later became a prime minister, signing the document saying, okay, we're now telling you that this is now in force, this is now a constitution, we've repatriated it, we're now under this act.
And it never happened.
Never happened. It doesn't happen. Now, when
so
you hear about
Canada is not a country at this point in time at all.
No, and it's not like this is a big family secret. It's not like you have a dirty Uncle Charlie living in the basement. Like it's out in the open. Like when Brian Mulroney became prime minister, he said, "We got to fix this." Like Quebec never agreed. This document had never been proclaimed. The act has not been adjusted. Like the sections aren't rejigged. I mean, we have to do something about it. So we had what's called a Meech Lake Constitutional Meeting. They called it an accord. And they tried to get Quebec to sign it by giving them more, trading benefits and whatever. And it was a big deal in Canada. And we had a referendum on it. And it was really funny because people were told, well, we need to have the referendum so that the 1982 Constitution is actually in force. And we had the referendum. The referendum failed. Then the next day, the lawyers go back into courts and say, we're going to defend the Constitution. Well, what Constitution? It hasn't been passed yet. But the lawyers just kept on as if it never happened. So then, they tried again in a thing called the Charlottetown Accord, and I was one of the chairmen of the No Committee. It was a terrible proposition. It made things way worse. So again, we had the Charlottetown Accord trying to get Quebec to sign and get the whole country to accept the charter, and it failed too. So as we sit here, it's been publicly announced that the 82 document has never actually been ratified. It's never been passed, and it can't be passed until Quebec agrees to this English language education, which they never will do. We've had 2 referendums trying to get it passed, and they both failed. But if you ask the average Canadian on the street, do we have a constitution? They would go, well, yeah. It's the 1867 Constitution Act and the 1982 patriation of the Constitution. Well, no, it's not actually. So, it's kind of getting back to the original. I have to admit that the reason it goes on is because we're stinking Canadians. We're too polite to actually. Okay, we just got to.
The only time Canadians fight is when you're playing hockey. Okay, I'm a hockey person.
Yeah, that's right. Well, we did have a bad reputation in World War I. I don't know if you remember that. Do you know our reputation?
No, I don't.
Oh, maybe a lot of Canadians are going to be mad at me.
No,
yeah.
You guys are as savage in other areas as you are on the ice.
If you get us to join a war, it's not a good thing for the enemy. We we got in big trouble in World War One. We shot all the wounded and we shot all the prisoners.
Oh, for real?
Yeah, trench warfare. Canadians had a really bad reputation. Like, we didn't play by the rules at all. Said, well, if we're going to do it, we're going to do it. It's either all in or all out.
Kinda
So
hit
anybody who was an enemy, we just killed them. We didn't take any prisoners, and anybody who was wounded, we just shot them. It was a very, very bad thing. Canadians acted horribly, and yeah, we've kind of had a reputation. Hockey and joining wars, we change, just like we wait. You know, we sort of our anger, we let it out. It's only certain times, right? The rest of the time, we're like,
like a bear coming out of hibernation, right?
yeah, exactly, right.
Wow.
Yeah.
Well,
So we live with the situation the way it is, and we're still hoping. You know, Doug Force had a good idea to get people back to the table as constituents. But I mean, the eastern part of our country has an iron grip on the governance of our country, and you know, it's come up a few times before where the West has been treated so badly, and I won't bore you with all the details, but you know,
I think people need to know, because that, you know, there's just so many people, there's so many of us that don't know, and unless you're in it, you really don't know all of the aspects of what people live with on a daily basis. We really need to know what's going on and make good decisions and not assume we know, because I don't know anything about it.
Yeah. Well, I mean, we've been basically used as a source of wealth for the eastern part of our country. Like, Alberta and Saskatchewan developed a lot of resources. As I said, I've sent you information on uranium. Like, the two provinces, we supply a very huge percentage of uranium to the world, and I think Saskatchewan is like the number one, hands down, supplier of potash to farmers in America, and we export quite a bit of it. And Alberta, we have enough oil in Alberta to supply the United States just by ourselves for like 50 years. So there's good work here. People come from all over the place to work in Alberta. You know, we don't keep people out here. We don't try to keep the wealth for ourselves. But then the East, like, we had a program originally called the National Energy Program, that when Alberta started really benefiting from the oil program after being dirt poor for decades. Like, we were basically agricultural, and bad weather and bad markets. Alberta was very poor. Then all of a sudden we got some wealth from the oil, and finally people started to develop an economy and, you know, get property values up higher. And as soon as that happened, Trudeau said, you're making a lot of money, so what you have to do now is you have to sell oil to the rest of Canada at a very reduced price. And then he put an internal tax on it, called it the National Energy Program, and he basically took all the profits away from Alberta and then threw it in the pot for them to spend. So all the profit that we made basically went to Ottawa, and they just distributed it. And then they started something called what they call equalization programs. So the intent of equalization is, you know, we're Canadians. So if a province is having a hard time and we're having a good time, we'll send you a few $1 billion. How's that? So we equalize, and I think the United States has a similar balancing program. It's not called equalization like ours, but and it's a fine concept. But the way it's worked is, they don't calculate the equalization based on what a province actually could earn, the potential, or what resources they have of their own to develop. They base it on what they decided to develop and what they've decided to earn. So we have Quebec and New Brunswick with natural gas reserves that are huge. But because they set up this program where Alberta gives, I don't know what it's now, up to $16 billion every year to Quebec. So Quebec says, well, we're part of the net zero. We're not going to develop oil and gas. It's killing our planet with this hoax of climate change. So they said, well, we've decided we're not going to develop oil and gas. So now their revenue as a province has dropped, and they take $16 billion from Alberta from oil and gas, which they said is an evil thing. So now we have to make all the money, and we take the profits and we give it to other provinces. We never get any of it back.
It's so similar to the United States. It's almost frightening to take from the producers and give to give to somebody who has justified non-productivity. And,
Right.
and it's wrong. I mean, it's an enslavement is what it is.
Yeah, it is. It's even worse in Quebec. They make a lot of money selling to Americans hydroelectric. For some reason, they said, we just want to remove hydroelectric revenues out of the formula for equalization.
So you just at will, you just at will change things to your benefit.
Yeah.
Oh, okay, we're going to just take what we're producing out because that doesn't
Yeah.
matter. It just doesn't
Yeah.
matter. And then we're going to take what you have and put it over here.
Right. Exactly.
Nice.
You know, and I mean, and right now, like Saskatchewan, this is a big disaster in Saskatchewan. Saskatchewan is like very dependent on canola. And this is another very weird thing is they're on the streets angry with President Trump on tariffs. I don't know if people know this, but the 100% tariff on canola is from China. We're not suffering because Donald Trump on the canola. It's China. That's our market for canola. They buy most of it, and they put 100% tariff. And you know why? Because Eastern Canada put 100% tariff on their electric cars. Nobody wants a Chinese electric car. In Canada, you can't go anywhere in an electric car because you run out of juice. There's nowhere to plug it in. I mean, we don't care.
Not only that, it's like cold water doesn't do well with batteries in general.
Absolutely. But because they put this stupid ban on and they put 100% tariff on Chinese cars that the East really cares about, well, then China says, well, then we'll put 100% tariff on your canola. And the government looks at this and says, it's only Saskatchewan, who cares? So now the cost, the revenue, it's a heartbreaker. The revenue is less than the cost of production right now. That's got nothing to do with the United States. But a lot of people are really mad at Donald Trump because China put a tariff on canola. People just don't watch. They don't watch the news. Like they don't stay up on affairs.
They take the headlines and they don't figure out what's really going on underneath what they're the propaganda they're putting out there, which is really sad because honestly we're in a war right now, and it's you can't debate that we're in a war. It's an internal war. They infiltrated us. They took us over by infiltration. I suspect that Canada, as the conversation, I'm not going to pretend to know, but is the same way. But the United States was taken over by infiltration, by blackmail. Right. Even good people that got in office are being coerced and blackmailed and threatened by this global crime syndicate who is pulling the little puppet strings on anybody that decides, or most people that decide to get in there and try to fix it. So. Yeah, that I think we can all agree on that, because how many people do you have within your government that you can look at and say, you're nothing but a globalist bastard? Really, that's all you are. I mean, you are an illegitimate individual pretending to care about the country when all you're doing is self-enriching, enriching the banksters, the globalist politicians, all of their NGO type stuff, and all of these World Health Organization, the UN, all of that needs to be thrown in the trash. It needs to be, let's just see what they can actually produce. I'm going to say nada, nothing. Parasites. All there is parasites that live off of good people. Yeah.
When I was first involved with federal politics, it's a strange, long story how it all happened, but we did end up doing something that maybe will catch your attention. We did displace what would have been your Republican Party with our party. So I mean, it's a two-party system there in Canada. It's pretty much we alternate between Liberals and Conservatives. So I don't know about how the colors happen. Why is Conservative blue in Canada and it's red in the United States? I think we're right because China's red. So maybe you got to sort that out.
But yeah, we got a little bit of a problem in the Republican Party here. I'm just going to say that it's not a small problem. It's a large problem in the United States.
But as you know,
they're all in on it. They think we we think that we've got two teams that are battling it out, the good versus evil, but they're both bad.
Yeah. So I'll tell you the funny part of it, and maybe you'll write me off as a religious fanatic, but in my life, 3 or 4 times in my life, I've actually had a vision, and I mean something that's persistent, it's fleshed out, the details are there, and it won't go away. So I was involved with a party called the Reform Party. It was wonderful. The best individuals I ever met in my life. Good, honorable people that just wanted to serve the country. Started out west. A guy named Preston Manning was our leader, and very common sense party. The most famous line he said to Canadians is, when you're digging a hole and you find out that you've dug too deep, first thing you do, stop digging. And we used to broadcast the fact that until Pierre Trudeau, it was a shame in Canada to end the year in debt. Every province, every municipality, every federal government was expected to end up zero at the end of the year with a balanced budget. Pierre Trudeau started borrowing money, and when he got away with it, now it's become normal, for us to just expect that there's going to be a deficit and government should borrow money. That's not smart. It doesn't make any sense.
We're the same way.
It doesn't. I know. People just expect, well, what is the borrowing for the year going to be? That's not the question. The question is, why should we have to borrow anything? Why should we be benefiting today from something that our children and grandchildren are going to have to pay off at some point? Everybody with a credit card knows you have to pay the bill at some point. And as you pay your bill on your credit card, you can do less. You have less disposable money when you're done. So it doesn't make any sense. But it's become normalized, So the Reform Party, I have to say, got a lot of traction simply talking about the debt and borrowing and deficit borrowing. And then, we pointed out the fact we really don't have a proper constitution, and we tried to talk about other issues, but it really caught attention of people, and we became the official opposition. So for a while, Canada had a pretty much 3-party system. So we had 2 conservative type parties, and then 1 left-leaning party. So for a while, we would have had, in the United States, you would have had constitutional party like yours, or 2 Republican parties, and then the Democrats. So we had that for a while, and then we just realized that Eastern Canada didn't really want to stop borrowing money. They just really didn't want to do this. So what are we going to do? So we campaigned hard. The conservative, that at the time was called the Progressive Conservative Party, which is, if you get the image of progressive conservative, means you take 1 step forward and then 1 step back and then 1 step forward and 1 step. It's a conflict of terms. It's just crazy. So they became the same. They became a uniparty. We used to have a saying here, liberal Tory, same old story, because the progressive conservatives acted just like the liberals did. And eventually people caught on to that. And they said, you know what, we really do need a balance. So I was part of a movement, we called it the United Alternative Movement. We said, look, Reform Party, we've got a lot of MPs. We've actually formed official opposition. Progressive Conservative in the East, you're not going to get anywhere. But because we've divided up the Conservative vote in 2, the Liberals will stay in power forever. So we created a movement, and it helped a little bit. So then the next time there was a vote, the Progressive Conservative Party went down to Jean Charest and Elsie Wayne, 2 MPs. That's all they had in the whole country, 2 MPs. And they were deep in debt. And of course, our side, on the Reform Party side, we're pay as you go, don't borrow any money, work hard. All of our constituent associations had tons of money. We had $8 million in the bank. We were flush with cash. We raised money, we invested it. We fundraised in between. We didn't borrow any money. We were very fiscally responsible. So there's a combination of events. So we merged, and that's sort of when I joined in the national council of the party. And then we had, after United Alternative, we actually had a unification process where we officially merged the 2 parties together and then changed the name to just the Conservative Party. So from humble beginnings, like I think your party is the Constitutional Party.
Yeah, I'm the chairman of the Constitution Party in Michigan, but our Secretary of State's trying to obstruct us from declaring our affiliation with the National Constitution Party. It is the Constitution Party in Michigan under the name of U.S. Taxpayers Party. So there's all sorts of dirty stuff they're doing out there.
We had that too. Had that too. Like I can't tell you. When I was in Ottawa and we're getting this all sorted out, they tried every trick in the book. They even tried this one, that somewhere in the books there was a detail that you can dissolve a party, and there's a mechanism for getting rid of the money and the assets. You can dissolve a party that's in debt, and then there's a process where the people in the party have to assume the debt and pay for it. And if you merge two parties together, there's a process of how to use the funds. So they try to tell us that we can merge, but you have to give all your assets away as if you dissolve the parties and you're starting with fresh zero, and you still have to recover the debt. I mean, they tried every trick in the book to keep us from doing it. And it was just hilarious. Like every day you'd get up, in Ottawa, and you'd meet with the lawyers, and the people from the government would sit down and they'd read you the rules. And, I was at the time friends with Stephen Harper and a lot of people from the old progressive conservative parties, the good ones. And we'd look at the lawyers and they'd say, you can't do that. And they say, well, you know what? We're just going to do it. No, you can't do it. Well, we're just going to do it. And so they said, well, you can't just merge the parties and keep the money. And they go, well, that's what we're going to do. And it was like an everyday thing. Like, what are they going to tell us we can't do today? And we just show up and we'd say, well, we're just going to do it. And then, when they're leaving the room, you could hear them whispering, and they're thinking, you know what? That guy's going to be prime minister in a couple of years. Maybe we better not do this. And that's actually the way it went.
Wow.
So, we just damn the torpedoes. Sometimes you just have to, they tell you you can't, you just do it.
Yes.
There was a time in Ontario, I met Chris Hodgson when Mike Harris formed a really good conservative government in Ontario, just north of you there. And brought in a lot of people, non-politicians, like a whole group that were never politicians before, just good, hard-working people, men and women, running businesses and, smart and just caring about people. So Chris Hodgson was really a sportsman outdoors. So he was given a portfolio of natural resources, and it was in such disarray after the NDP socialist government was there. Conservation officers would go to their vehicles and they couldn't patrol because they ran out of fuel for their trucks. So they, believe it or not, they were publicly asking for donations to put fuel in their trucks so they could patrol the game preserves and do their job. It's just embarrassing. So Chris said, well, what I'm going to do then is, from the sale of all of the fishing and hunting licenses, I'm going to take that money and I'm going to support the management of fish and wildlife. And the bureaucrat said, you cannot direct the tax. You can't choose the destination of a tax. All taxes have to go into a general revenue, and then you apply in a budget. You just can't do it. And he says, hey, I'm not a politician, so don't tell me I can't do it. They told him over and over and over, you can't just take the money from the licenses and use it for wildlife management. And they must have told him 10 times, and he just kept telling them, look, I told you, I'm not a politician. I'm a businessman. If I want to take the money in my department from selling fishing and hunting licenses and use it for management to protect it and develop the resource, I'm going to do it. 6 months later, it hits the news. Chris Hodgson manages to direct tax and revenues into his department, and now everything is running fine.
Oh, that's fun.
I know. Sometimes you just have to say, I'm just going to do it. I'm just going to do it.
The same kind of thing happened here in Michigan with the roads. They have dumped everything into the general fund, and everybody's got their hand in that cookie jar, and there's no division. So it's like there's no control, there's no procedures, and so everybody's like, "Wow, look at this great big whole pot of cash here.
Yeah,
I want that." And that's what they do, and they siphon it away from what it was intended for.
Yeah, exactly.
Can't do
so
that.
Anyway, after sort of touching all our historical background, we're you and I started communicating back and forth is, Saskatchewan and Alberta, mostly Alberta, have talked a number of times of doing what, Doug Force was alluding to from the beginning, and just saying, okay, the charade is up. The emperor has no clothes. We know we're sovereign, and clearly there is no real solid legislation describing how a government in an independent sovereign province should operate. Like Britain did not give us too many details because they didn't want to give us details. Canada is different than South Africa. It's different than New Zealand. It's different. So we were supposed to decide our own form of governance. We were supposed to, as constituents, we were supposed to agree on our constitution, our constitutional rights, on our form of governance. But we do know that we own our own resources. We do know that we're no longer a colony. I mean, some of us know that the 1982 Constitution Act is not really valid. Our problem is, in insurance lingo, it's called an estoppel, or, in court, common law, is called a precedent. Unfortunately, every day we get up, we abide by it, and, we hire lawyers to use the invalid act as a basis for law. We've been doing it for a while. We've kind of hung ourselves there. But, 4 times in the last couple of years, Saskatchewan and Alberta have actually pushed back. And it's surprising. The people who pushed back aren't really on side with what I'm talking about today. Like, they believe that we went along with this farce for so long that we're really hooked by it. However, we have some good people in power right now in Saskatchewan and in Alberta. And, okay, the one that I really had to enjoy was they had this devious plan in Ottawa on this net zero climate change garbage that they were going to stop farming in Saskatchewan. They were going to find a way. They're trying to choke off the fuel. They're trying to let tariffs on the products. They're trying to, transportation costs. For some reason, they want to crash the economy and start, crickets growing and people to stop being wealthy, and they want to destroy agriculture. Yeah. So anyway, yeah. So they hired people who used to be the same title as me, like a gun-carrying federal enforcement DOE, and the department I worked for was actually called Department of Environment Fisheries. So they hired people called Department of Environment Climate Change. So they hired a bunch of guys with guns, and believe it or not, they even built a jail, a detention center for climate change. It's a climate change detention center. And they authorized them to go to the prairies, and they were taking water samples from dugouts. And I know what they're doing. They're taking samples at certain times, and then after the farmers fertilize their crops, then they're going to take samples again, and they're going to prove that there's too much nitrogen, too much carbon in the circulation, and they were going to use the differential in the water tests to actually shut farming down some way. I know Oregon has got similar things going on like this, where animals in water, somehow they're using that to shut down farming. So one of my friends, he's the number 2 guy in Saskatchewan, worked for the premier. I don't know who decided, but they just got real angry one day, and they caught on to what was happening. So they passed an act in the province that says, and it specifically outlines, federal officers, if you come to Saskatchewan, don't get out of your car. If you get out of your car and you step on a land that's owned by a farmer or the province, that's sovereign territory, you will be charged with trespassing. So they specifically have an act to charge these federal goons with trespassing, and they kicked them out of the province.
Oh man, I'm loving that. That's awesome.
Yep. In Alberta, they charge us, there's certain caps on emissions. So, the companies operating here, they tell us what the emissions are, the volume. I mean, we know how much exhaust there is from refinery and exploration and whatever they do. But the federal government decided, well, we don't want to believe you, the province, and we don't want to believe the operators. So we're going to send our own climate change people into the offices to read the records, and then we're going to determine how much emissions come out, and then we will tax you based on what we think the emissions are. And of course, it's way higher than the actual number. So they're lying about it. So Premier Smith said, well, it worked for Saskatchewan. So she went to court and says, if your officers come into Alberta, you'll be charged with trespassing on land. Do not come here. You're not even allowed in the building. Get out. And they're gone.
Sounds like a plan.
We're doing it, like incrementally, we're doing it. And it's funny that when the ruling happens in court, they're actually quoting the 1931 Statute of Westminster. So people are not out front agreeing with what I'm saying, but you say somewhere in court, they have to find a valid act to base their judgment on, and you can't get away from the fact there are some valid judgments. There is some valid legislation that's passed. So whether they know it or not, it's actually working in their favor. So we're starting to do it, and our government is going along with us on it. We took a vote a couple of years ago on this equalization. So we voted 62% in a vote to stop this unfair stealing of our resources and transferring it to areas who just decided they're not going to develop their own resources. So we're telling our provincial government to do that. But we are looking at actually having a referendum on independence. So Alberta then would be an independent area waiting for the other provinces to do the same thing. So then only sovereign people can do what they call federate. Canada's called a confederation, but it's a made-up word because our sovereign areas have never confederated. When you have a confederation, there are usually what they call articles of confederation, and you've got them in the United States. When you first had your confederation of 13 or whatever, you had articles of confederation. These are the terms that you federated together and how you're sharing together. So we're thinking Alberta might very soon have that kind of a vote. And if we do that, then the other provinces can do the similar thing, and then the residents, the constituents of our sovereign region can actually have a conversation with the constituents of another sovereign region, and then we'll form a new form of government in Canada. So it's a little ambitious.
And well, it's exciting, and the world is changing right now, that everything that has been working poorly is getting, if you look at it, everything seems to be getting remolded. So it's going to be an interesting future. I think everything's going to change. It's just a matter of when does the other shoe drop? President Trump is setting the precedents for everything. And I think when he said he's giving us back in America, the government back to we the people, I think he really meant it, giving it back to us. But that means we have to act. We have to send notices. Mm-hmm. We have to remove people that have been here, employing theft and the tearing down of the nation. But it requires all of us to work together. Well, I'm pretty excited to talk to you. And when you guys started sending me information on exactly what was going on in Alberta, what an exciting time. And I just really appreciated the reach, mm-hmm. The outreach for it. Mm-hmm. The movie or the documentary that Doug made is amazing. What really I'm curious about is he said he had the same type of information on the United States of America, mm-hmm. a little different, but it's almost the same. And he was asked and told to get out of the United States and never come back. Mm-hmm. So and I don't remember which agency told him that. I know I've got it documented somewhere, but he was, I believe it was the FBI that told him. It was either the FBI or the CIA told him, get out and you may never come back in the United States or you will be arrested. Yeah. Well, that's not how it works when you disagree with somebody or that they're there to point out your criminality, FBI, clowns in America, whatever you want to call them, the deep state intelligence organizations and such. It's just really too bad. But I think we're on the right track right now, and I'm just so happy that our countries are actually working together. And I would like to encourage President Trump to absolutely reach out to you guys as well as the people that are around him, and mm-hmm. let's fix this thing. Let's fix we need to fix the entire world because it's been a global crime syndicate that's torn it down, that's used these criminals that are in prisons and shipped them away. I mean, that's what's been happening at our southern border, and everybody got all butthurt about it when President Trump said they're not sending us their best. I'm sorry, but
my goodness,
he's right about everything. They were shipping in agents of chaos, planting them all over the United States to call them up into an attack. It was an invasion of an army set against this nation.
Well, some days you have to think about this democracy business, and I'm starting to develop the feeling that there's a regional mass formation psychosis happening in Canada, because I mean, you have to get a concept of this. The guy who's leading in the polls right now, boy, how can I do this without getting in really big trouble?
Oh, you can get in all kinds of trouble here because I've got no censorship. So say whatever you want to say.
Yeah, okay. But you got to remember, though, I'm the guy in the political party who used to counsel members of parliament on how to phrase the things they said so they wouldn't get sued.
Gotcha.
Because it's a waste of time. Okay,
if you're question,
you gotta be as innocent as a dove but wise as a serpent.
There you go.
It's amazing. Like, politicians can say an awful lot. I mean, as long as you throw the word alleged in there copiously, be careful what you say in the House of Parliament and on the street. You can say a lot of things, and say it properly, and maybe it's a Canadian nature. I know a lot of dirt on a lot of politicians, and going from George W. to, forward, because I've been in the back rooms and I've heard the conversations, and, easy to sue me because they hide what they do so well. So person has to be really careful. But the mass formation psychosis that's happening in the East is just absolutely astounding. Like, you got to consider that Mark Carney, number one, if you look at his history, the Epstein files have come out, and there's six numbers in the Epstein files for his sister-in-law, where both he and his wife and his sister-in-law partied with the Epsteins. There's pictures all over social media where they socialized together. It would be hard to believe that they didn't know what was going on if they were in continuous contact with each other. If a conservative was found to have pictures on social media with the Epsteins, it would be plastered on every mainstream media outlet. I think the guy would actually have to resign his candidacy because it would be so disturbing. But because he's a liberal, people they don't pay any attention. Now, Carney was in the United Kingdom, and he was the governor of the Bank of England. Liz Truss has actually come out and said he did so much damage to our country. Like, he printed so much more money. He killed our monetary system, and he destroyed the mortgage system. He destroyed the bank, and England still hasn't recovered from the damage that Mark Carney did. But he's bragging about him being the governor of the Bank of England. Well, then in Canada, two of my friends, like Jim Flaherty, who was a friend of mine from Ontario, I think I convinced him to join federal politics and become the finance minister of Canada, and we used to tour on speaking engagements together. He's a brilliant man, and Stephen Harper is an economist, world-class economist. These two very dedicated, conservative-minded men took Canada through the 2008 financial crisis. They made some hard decisions on, as a conservative, stimulating and spending and paying down and making cuts. And I mean, they were quite brilliant. Mark Carney was the governor of the bank, but he didn't make any hard calls. He might have had some say on the interest rate, on the prime rate in Canada. That's about it. And this is all public knowledge. This man is not a good financial manager. He's been on salary with the old Liberal government for years, 10 years, and he was their financial consultant. And, get a concept of this. Canada had a history of 148 years of operation as a government. And like I said, Pierre Trudeau started putting us into debt. So we accumulated a bit of debt. In 10 years, this guy, as a financial advisor, has accumulated the same amount of debt in 10 years that the previous 148 years accumulated. He doubled our debt in 10 years. But people in the East are voting for him because he's a financial man. He's a financial genius. He was at the helm when that whole thing happened. Now, if you add to that, we all know that the Chinese government has infiltrated the Liberal Party in many different ways. There are two detectives, federal detectives, who have not been allowed to talk, that have finally on their own said, look, this information is not coming out. And I'm not saying it, but they are. They're saying that this Chinese interference in our elections was made known to the Deputy Prime Minister, Minister of Finance, Minister of Intergovernmental Affairs. Like 3/4 of the people that are running publicly have been outed as being under the control of the Communist Party of China. Our Deputy Prime Minister is who still now in the cabinet and still will be part of the next government if the Liberals get reelected. She was the Deputy Prime Minister and Finance Minister before. She's sort of one of the Bandera people in Ukraine. She's part of the Azov Regiment, which we all know is a neo-Nazi organization. And her grandfather has been alleged to have been an SS operative who got a printing business from the Nazis during the war, and he was a propagandist. That's where their money came from and their family. They brought an SS officer to the Parliament of Canada and gave him a standing ovation because he was fighting the Russians back in World War II. And all our idiot MPs stood up and clapped, and then while they're clapping, they go, well, wait a minute. If he was fighting the Russians, well, the Russians are fighting the Nazis. Oh my God. Then they realized the only way that you would be in that position fighting the Russians is that you're a Nazi. And then they find out he's not only a Nazi, he was the head of an SS division. Like, the connection is so solid between neo-Nazism, communist China, our Deputy Prime Minister sitting on the board of the world, the WTO, and the World Economic Forum. She's on the board of directors. She's the person who writes books on behalf of biographer for George Soros. And
Wow.
all this information, like, people are voting for people who are said or alleged to be under the control of the Communist Party, who have ties to neo-Nazism, who have a disastrous financial record, and they're going to, by the looks of it, they're prepared to put them back into government for another 4 years. Like, how can you look at the price of housing in the area as like doubled or tripled since they've been in power? The dollar has dropped. We're probably the lowest G7 country as far as GDP. It's really a financial disaster out there, and people in the East just seem to love this guy. They see no problem with it, and they're smart people. I just cannot believe on economics alone that they would say, when in the past we have somebody with a financial record like that alone, even if they were wonderful, nice, cheery people with lots of fun ideas. But you bankrupted us. You added as much debt in 10 years as the country had in the previous 148. You're not allowed to run our country anymore, but they're putting them back in for the reason of them being sound financial consultants. The only reason they're voting for him is they perceive that he would be better to argue with Donald Trump.
Yeah, because Trump. That's the whole thing. Because Trump. Well, and they've been really good at the propaganda against those that would actually get in to help and or save the downturn on everything. It's really pretty sad. And all they're doing is selling an illusion. It's that fantasy mentality that they're going to make everything perfect for us. This person get in there. And we had the same thing with Biden. How long was Biden in office? Like 5,000 years, right? The guy's like never got out. Why would anyone vote for an abject failure. He was a failure on every single level. The man was a failure.
Mm-hmm. Well, I guess we'll see. Like the 10 million missing ballots when Biden got elected. I mean, that was quite spectacular in the last election. Where did those 10 million extra voters go? Well,
Yeah.
obviously, there's some kind of problem with the vote. And maybe in Canada, the same thing is happening. I mean, the polling companies generally lean towards the Liberals. And maybe they're not correct in the polls. Maybe the Liberals won't get reelected. But then again, there might be fraud too. How do you know? Like, as much as the government of Canada in all levels say that you have to have identification to vote in Canada, if you're 10 years old and you have a printer and a computer, you can make up a document in 15 minutes. It'll get a ballot in your hand. I don't know if you have vouching. Oh, let me go back to the ballot in hand. Just to give you an example, because my little town I live in here has had a library. I don't know if it's still in effect, but if you have a library card from the once in operation library here, and you bring your library card, you can get a ballot. The people at the voting station, they have no idea what a town like mine, a small town, what their library card actually looks like. How are they going to dispute the fact that you have a library card from this town? So they'll give you a ballot, you can vote. And we also have a system here called vouching. You can show up with absolutely no identification whatsoever. You can lie through your teeth and say, I don't have anything. I don't have a birth certificate, driver's license, library card, nothing. If the person behind you looks at you and says, they look okay to me, they give them a ballot.
What?
Yeah, vouching. It's called vouching.
That's insane.
Well, exactly. And then their name doesn't actually get written onto a list, so they can get vouched for. Like, let's say the NDP did it. So the NDP has 50 people at the balloting line there, so they can vouch for 50 people. Well, those same 50 people could go to another station and there'll be 50 there. Their names don't get added to the list, so they can be discovered that at another voting station that they've already voted. So these people that get a ballot in their hand by vouching can go from station to station to station, and there's no paper trail. The scrutineers and the Elections Canada workers are not trained to identify it. Now, the list of documents, if you just want to give a piece of paper, all I'd have to do is just decide I'm a really good guy and I really don't like homelessness, so I'm going to create what I call a shelter. So I just decide in my brain that, okay, today I'm going to take in some homeless people. So then I get a letter and I say, I'm taking in some homeless people. So I can find 20 people on the street and say, I hear you're homeless. Would you like to come to my homeless shelter? And they go, yeah. So I just, on my letterhead, I give myself a name. I'm a homeless shelter. I'm the manager of the homeless shelter. This person stays here. Give them a ballot. They take my little handmade letter, go to the ballot, they can vote.
Oh my goodness.
Nobody checks to see if I'm actually a valid homeless shelter. I can do it as many times as I want. As long as you have two pieces of paper, you don't have to have a photo on it. There's a hierarchy. It starts off looking valid in what you need to vote. Like you need a government ID with a picture on it. And then if you don't have that, well, two pieces of ID without a picture, that's okay. Well, if you don't have that, a third document. Well, if you don't have that, then there's a list of all these various documents, liability certificate for your car, a property tax notice, a prescription from a doctor, a library card. I mean, pretty much anything that's a piece of paper that has your name and an address on it can be used to get a ballot in the hand. And the poor people at the station, they don't know how to verify this. They don't have to take a picture of it. They don't have to keep a record of it. They don't have to tell other stations that this person has already voted. They just are told, if this person meets this criteria, you have to give them a ballot and they can vote. So in my opinion, okay, and I'm not making an allegation, I'm just saying in my opinion that in certain ridings throughout the country, the ridings that could be used to add another 10% to the vote over and above. So I think in places, in areas where it's slim, you could enlist, not like the ballot harvesting that I've seen done in the United States in boxes full, but you can always add another few hundred here and there, but the same few hundred can be added all over the place. I just have my suspicions that that's what's going on. And I'm saying that as I have run as a federal candidate 3 times. And in the political party I was in, I was on a committee called the Secretariat, and we were tasked with studying voter fraud. So we have actually tried to complain a number of times for inconsistencies, and you never get anywhere. Anybody who votes, basically their vote counts. So I'm suspecting that, that we really, if we want fair elections, we need to be a lot more diligent. Like in Alberta, like I say, we have good governments here. At least they've decided no more tabulators. So we don't allow tabulators. So that's one good thing, because we are suspicious that there's programming that can be done to a tabulator to allow or disallow votes. So
we've
at least
proven
we have
that there is. We've
Yeah.
absolutely proven it. I mean, I've had it on my show on how they're flipping votes around, how they're spiking the voter rolls right before election, and then right after the election, it goes, it goes right up before, and then I'm backwards in the camera here, but it goes right up before, and it comes right down afterwards. And then you have, like our director of elections in our Bureau of Elections here, he was the chairman of the board on ERIC, which was the voter rolls, national voter rolls. I don't have a whole lot of faith in this here. I'm just telling you, because the people that are running the government historically, before Donald Trump got in, President Trump, there was absolutely the fox guarding the hen house. You're not going to get anywhere, because they're just going to eat you, because that's their food. And it's unfortunate, but that's what's been going on. They have not been performing as they should be as managers of our trust contractually. It's a contract, service contract.
Absolutely.
And to manage our trust. Now, you got talking about the natural resources that they're pilfering. We are the poster child of that in the state of Michigan. And I'm not polite on it, okay? I'm not Canadian. I'm a Michigander. That means I'm a mutt who is just completely sick of their crap, right? They have claimed 4.6 million acres as their ownership and claimed the mineral rights and the logging rights. These people within the DNR have got more power than any police state organization you can imagine. They can come on without a warrant. They can seize all your property. There's no recourse, and you got to fight to get it back. They ended up taking 4.6 million acres. The state has no right to own property. Zero. It's unconstitutional because it belongs to the people. And I want to know where the receipts are going for all of the natural resources, to the point of view. It's like every drop of oil coming out of the ground, every drop of anything that's a petroleum product, whether it's natural gas, and I'm not going to use drop just as a way of measure, right? We all know what I'm talking about here. Whether it's a gas or a liquid, doesn't make any difference. People of that province should be being paid a royalty for the materials coming out. Instead, they grab that, throw that into the general fund, and the next thing you know, we're funding shrimp on a treadmill. Ridiculous stuff like that. And I don't know if there's one shrimp. I don't know if there's 1,000 shrimp. I don't know if there's 1,000,000 shrimp. I don't even really care about the shrimp. But the point being is that there's no accountability for where the money goes. And we didn't have a choice of where this is going to say no. Something that came up recently that I thought was brilliant, and it was Shawn Starry that brought this up, was the downvoting that happened in Rome and Greece. Every period, there's a period of time, and the people got to downvote the people in office. If they got a 60% downturn, you're voted off the island, and that position remained vacant until the people could fill it. Michigan, they're not even doing special elections. They're using areas outside of the voting where the votes should come from to appoint someone to fill it for the people, for the voters in there. This is so patently wrong, and it is absolutely an invasion of foreign entities. It's just another way to get around what was supposed to happen and what was laid out by the founding fathers in the Constitution. They've totally obliterated the rule of law and the process here. I know,
Yeah.
and I know you guys are in the same. We're in the same boat.
Yeah.
You know?
Well,
I'd love to see the
all I
federal
can tell you, to encourage you is, look at the history of the Reform Party. I guess in context, it'd be the same as your party eventually just taking over the Republican Party and making it better.
I think that there's the
And
only way that it can be done at this point in time is that the Republican and Democrat parties are, in fact, they have engaged in pretended legislation to give them the ability to take foreign funds to control our elections.
yeah, and
We don't have an election of the people right now. We don't.
right.
It's an illusion.
Yeah, and I think Donald Trump, he used the system because he's brilliant, and he had to in the
He's
time
smart.
constraint. In the time constraint, he had to work within the system, and he did that. But I don't think he would have a problem if you formed a constitutional party and reformed the whole Republican Party and made it, adhere to a constitution and put rights back where they belong. I don't think you'd have an enemy there with Donald Trump.
I would love to see that. I would love to see that happen. And I was just voted in as the chairman of the Constitution Party here in January, and I'm going to tell you, we're going to see it's about to hit the fan here a little bit. Like, I filed a lawsuit a couple weeks ago, and you'll never hear about any of the work that I've been doing or other people have been doing behind the scenes. We have people writing notices in the state of Michigan that are incredible. I had Greg Martini on yesterday, and I ended up talking with Craig Snyder and being in contact with some of these people. I'm like, hey, I want to work with you, because we have to employ every legal, lawful method that we can to take this nation back. And we're going to have to stand together. And all I see coming out of the Republican Party, the new chairman of the Republican Party, I believe he inherited another $1 million debt. These people cannot. How can we put our faith in people that can't run a party in a lawful manner and say, we're going to put one of your candidates in office? How can we possibly do that? Because they can't even run a party. And the parties are basically restaffed with people that have committed treason. Pete Hooks, he committed treason. He signed that Patriot Act not once but twice. That's treason. And it's like, so you look at what's transpired here, and you got a bunch of lemmings following after that, thinking as they sell this illusion that they're going to fix anything. You can't, because there's too much money involved in it. And those people that is their livelihood, they don't want to change it. They're going to put up parties. I've already been told one of the puppet candidates that they're going to run. And it was told to me in those exact words: we are going to run this candidate. Oh, really? I didn't think that the parties were supposed to be running candidates. I thought it was we, the people, should say, hey, you know what? We got a good person that we want in office. Totally backwards. Yeah. But well, I like the way you think.
You've got to get in the lineup somehow and make it happen. And I was going to allude to my religious fanaticism earlier, but one of the vision I had when I was just an area coordinator for a party, and then I had this vision where I'm in a building in Ottawa, and I'm sitting at a table with Stephen Harper and another few other people that I see, and I'm signing papers to start a new party. And then my next vision is I see Stephen Harper standing up being the Prime Minister of Canada in the House of Commons. And that this whole scenario kept playing in my head. And oftentimes, I was managing an insurance brokerage, and I just built myself a log cabin on a brook creek, and I had 40 acres and 2 wonderful kids, and I had a really nice life. And people said, well, what are you going to do next? And I said, I don't know. But I said, actually, I think I'm going to go to Ottawa, and then me and my friends are going to take over the country. And they'd laugh. And I'd say, what are you laughing about? And I go, well, said, no, I said, I had this vision. I said, I think I'm going to go to Ottawa, and I'm going to, take over with a couple of friends, and we're going to take over the country. So crazy David, right? And I'm telling him, well, I just have this vision. It just doesn't go away. And then very shortly after that, I I started a little movement to get Stephen Harper back as the leader of the party, which other people did too. I'm not taking credit for it. And then he's running for leadership. And then we had 2 MPs in Ontario, which I was in Ontario at the time. And I get this phone call one night, and it's one of the MPs from Ontario calling me and says, "Hey, David, how you doing? Good. Organizing is going well. Like, you guys got elected in Ontario. It's really great." And they said, "Yeah, we'd like you to be on the national council of the party." I go, "Well, that's great, but people get voted onto the national council by everybody in the province, and Ontario is huge, and I'm way up there in the north in Thunder Bay. So I don't know enough people to vote for me, and I'm not going to be able to outcompete somebody in Toronto. Like, this is not going to happen." They said, "Oh, you just leave it up to us." So Cheryl Gallant and Scott Reed and Stephen Harper coughed up a bunch of cash, an undisclosed amount of cash, and they started a social media campaign. And almost without my participation, they campaigned for me in the whole province, and then I got elected to the national council. I didn't do anything. I didn't push myself forward. I didn't, strive. I didn't make any speeches. I just basically went along with it. And then I get there, and then I'm told, "Actually, we want you to be on the executive." So I got on the executive as a national vice president. And within a very short period of time, we did form the official opposition, and then we took over the other party. And then there I am at the table, exactly the way God put it in my brain. I'm sitting at the table, and the camera comes out, and I signed the documents as the vice president of the emerging party. And then, the 2 leaders went into a leadership contest, and one went out, and others joined in. Stephen actually won the leadership of the new party, and then he became prime minister. And then I went home. And I'm telling people, so those years when I told you I had this vision, and now what do you think? Well, it humble beginnings.
God directs us, and He tells us what to do every step of the way. We just got to be willing to listen, and no matter how crazy it is, to step forward. You can't follow. And this is something that's hard for people, is that they want to go back to the safety of what they know, even if it's bad. They'll always go back. The human nature is that way. It takes truly a person who is extraordinary in a lot of ways to walk away from those, unusual, I guess let's say, to be able to walk away from those and ignore everything and just follow what God wants.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I mean, that's what we're called to do. That's what God calls us to do. He doesn't call us to be sheeple. He doesn't call us to follow the masses. The masses killed Jesus.
Mm-hmm.
That's what happened, is the masses killed Jesus.
Yeah.
And they used, it was the religious Jews that killed Jesus. And they used the politicians to do it.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
And everybody cheered for Barabbas. And it's like, are you kidding me?
Mm-hmm.
And you killed an innocent man. And it happens over and over again.
Mm-hmm.
And if we keep going back to that golden calf, we keep going back to what's familiar, even though those exact things are going to kill us.
Yeah.
It's incredible.
Yeah. 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 No, you got to do what you got to do. And if you catch a vision, you don't walk away from it. If you feel that's what you're being led to do, you just do it. And then everything falls into place behind that.
Yeah. You might have a little bit of a rough walk, but that's okay. God will give you the feet to walk the path.
Oh, you betcha. Yeah, no, I didn't have an easy time leaving my little comfortable zone there. And I'm not a city person. I'm an outdoor person, and I hate the traffic, and I hate the big lights, and it's just not in my nature. But I did it for a few years, and it worked out really well. So God leads you, you follow, and then you see the benefits later on when you look back. And sometimes you got to put yourself out there. What I say, I started politics in '82. I don't know what your polling is like, but in '82, in the area I lived in, Saskatchewan, the socialists were getting ready to get their 3rd term, and there's a guy named Roy Romano, who we call him Hollywood Roy. He was very handsome. He's kind of like your California governor there, and everybody loved him, and they called him the next premier. And he ran in my riding, and polling was 90%. So we couldn't even get a candidate in the Conservative Party. And I knew it would have been a horrible thing for them to get back in. I mean, the Socialists just bankrupted Saskatchewan until the Conservatives kicked them out. Now I think they're in their 5th term now, the Conservative people. And at the time, I thought, I just can't let this happen. So I didn't have the freedom to be the candidate. I was just busy with my kids and whatever. So we had a candidate, said he would be there, and we printed up signs with his name on it, and then he backed out. He said,
really?
Look, I run a business. He says, I pump gas. I don't want to have my name associated with, getting 10% of the vote. He says, I said I would do it, and I'm sorry you printed up all the signs, but I'm going to have to pull out.
Oh my
It's a
goodness.
disaster. What a disaster, right? We have no money. We have no candidate. We have signs. So we called him back and said, look, is there anybody in your family that'll run? He says, well, my daughter is old enough technically, but she's in university. So we called Joanne and said, look, we'll just put a sticker over the first name because the last name on the sign is your name. Can we put your name on as the candidate? Now, she really didn't want to do it because she's busy with school. And she says, well, if I don't have to talk, I don't have to be door knocking. If I don't have to do anything, she says, yeah, I'll go ahead. So good. So we had a few days left. And we come up with a strategy, and it might have been me that come up with it. I mean, we had a discussion about a strategy. How do you campaign for a candidate that's not door knocking? I said, well, let's be honest. So we had a line. So I wrote up a script, and we all went door knocking like crazy. That's all we could do in like 20 days. So we all went door knocking. Now keep in mind, the guy's polling 90%. All the media is calling him the next premier. And we're door knocking, and so this is the typical knock on the door, and I go, hi, I'm here with the Conservative Party, I'm campaigning for Joanne Zezelenchuk. And they go, oh, Joanne, what's she like? And I go, I have no idea, I've never met her. Go, what? Well, what's her policies? I said, I have no clue. I said, but we can't have socialists in for one more term. That was the magic. There was a magic thing. Saskatchewan people are like, we'll elect this breed of government for a short time, and then we get suspicious about corruption. Even if they're doing a good job, we toss them. We need someone else. That's the magic. There was only one thing that was like magic in that province. So I said, we only have one thing. So you know what? Let's have fun. Let's be like super honest at the door, and let's tell them exactly what's going on, and just get them thinking about one thing. Just one thing. You can't allow the socialists to get back in one more time. So people just had a blast because when you're talking, you're not political. It's a really tough job. Oops, there's something on my phone here. It's a tough job. If you tell people, look, just have fun, just relax, knock on the door, and say, I'm here representing somebody I never met. I have no idea if she's any good or not. We just can't allow the soldiers to get back in one more time. People were laughing the whole time, saying, "Are you serious? Are you serious?" You go, yeah. And if you see the sign, and we tell them the story, and they laugh, and they go, oh, you guys got a lot of nerve. Or they go, I know, but we just can't let the socialists get back in one more time. It caught like wildfire. It was just like lighting a fuse on a bomb. Like everybody was talking to everybody, and a couple of media people came around and said, oh, you do have a candidate. Well, what are you telling people at the door? So, well, we're being honest with them. Oh, that'll never work. She won by a couple hundred votes.
Wow, that's cool.
I know.
That's a great idea. I might steal that at some point in time. That's a great idea.
Well, just watch for the magic. If there's one issue that just captivated everybody, and I mean, I always find honesty is the best thing. Just tell everybody, just tell them.
Everybody's sick of the lying. They're sick of the scripted politicians, and I call them, their little plastic political action figures are out there, and they're saying their 5-10 minute speech, and they're out the door, and they don't talk to anybody because they can't. When you ask them a question, they're running for the hills because they don't know how to answer it because somebody is puppeting what comes out of their mouth. They're all controlled. Yeah. So you just keep on doing what you're doing, and watch for the magic, and then small humble beginnings. Don't disparage humble beginnings. Oh, that's and
you just never know. I mean, the Reform Party did what you're doing by the way I see it, and I don't really care what you wear, where you are in the polls. If God's leading you somewhere and reveals some secret to somebody in your campaign team, just keep your ears open and your eyes open, and you might just see that one thing that catches everybody's imagination. And have fun.
That's great encouragement. I really appreciate that. So, well, I'm happy to work with you, my friend, and I really want to see our countries working together. I mean, you're very inspiring and encouraging. I appreciate that a lot. So I'd love to have you come back on again and go over some more of this, because I'm sure you've got some great stories, and I'd like to hear the human interest stories and the things that you know from the perspective of being a Canadian as well. I think this Canada United States relationship thing is amazing, and hopefully President Trump is watching this, taking some notes, or what's going on. I think that's good.
Our ask is not complicated. I mean, a few years ago, the area of Kosovo broke away from their country, and the United States and Canada recognized that breakaway and it recognized their vote. So if Alberta takes steps to declare what we actually have today, which is sovereignty in our own province, all we're looking for is recognition. That's basically it. I mean, we'll negotiate, we'll do what we have to do, but I mean, we have such a strong bond between Alberta and the United States, especially. They always call Alberta the most American province. We're the most American-like. We have sheriffs, we have counties, our government, the way we divide our land up. We used to have non-stop flights from Texas oil patch to Alberta oil patch. I mean, we had people going daily back and forth between the two. I mean, Montana and Alberta, the park, we're almost indistinguishable in the way we are. And we can develop new markets for oil and gas and our products. I mean, it's not an impossible thing to do, but we really don't want to do that. I mean, we're ready to be here, and Alberta and Saskatchewan particularly, our psyche, our thinking, the way we want to do business. It's just a matter of recognition that if the American government would say, yeah, we actually have read the Statute of Westminster, we've read the BNN Act, it's expired. I mean, they can call me or anybody at any time to have a legal basis, because I don't want anybody to do anything untoward or illegal or illegitimate. But just recognizing us, I think very well the United States could deal directly with the province. And, if we have a free trade scenario, or if we have to adjust it with a tariff or an excise tax or something, well, that's fine. But you can deal directly with the province in Canada. Everything else is, like Doug Force put it, it's an illusion. Yes. There is an illusion of this need to go through Ottawa. And I'm guessing that a lot of advisors for President Trump are still telling him, we still have to deal with Ottawa. And I'm here to tell you, no, you really don't. It'll be fine.
It'll silence a few snowflakes over there, I'm pretty sure.
Yeah.
Start to melt a little bit. So yeah. Thank you so much for being here. We always end this with a prayer. Would you like to pray for us today, or would you like me to?
Oh, I can pray.
I love that. Fantastic.
Okay. Dear God, we just thank you for the way that you put us together on this earth here, Lord. And I'm just so happy that you give us visions and you give us energy and you give us direction. Lord, just let us dive deep into your word and find real guidance, that you are the way, the truth, the life. And Lord God, thank you for this time we had. Let us apply it as we move forward. And I ask you to bless Donna, bless the people in her party and all the people that appear on her show and that work with her, that you'd give them prosperity and keep them safe. And then we look for good results in the future. In Jesus' name, we give thanks for all these blessings. Amen.
In Jesus' name, amen. Thank you so much. Well, I appreciate you being on today and all the encouragement and seeing the great things that you've done. So we're going to go to that part of the show, boys and girls, where we go to ding, 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 ding. This is my 2022 protest. Please go to Donna or BrandenburgForGovernor.com, because I'm the best non-conceder who's ever not conceded in the history of the United States of America. And I'd like to have a discussion with the rightful president of the United States, President Donald J. Trump, about it in cowboy boots. Let's see who wears them better. and try to fix this thing. And so there you go. We have a lot to be thankful for. And there's a lot of good people, like I've said for quite a while, behind the scenes, like David, that are working, and people who really do believe in the rights given by God and assured by our Constitution, guaranteed by the Constitution. That isn't for us. That Constitution is for the government and tells them what they may not do and what they may do or shall do. It doesn't give them a, oh yeah, let's go fund, shrimp on a treadmill kind of stuff. No. Let's just take over some land and now we own it. No, that doesn't work. The public-private partnerships, totally unconstitutional. The whole thing. They don't have the rights to do that. Now we just got to stop them. So with that said, God bless you all. God bless all. Love, and God bless America. Make it a great day. It's going to be a great day. Stay on the line a minute, please, David. I'm going to end the broadcast, and we will see you tomorrow with Off the Grid. Lots more to talk about.
Okay.